the Charles Oliveira fight's just been announced, but I am curious, what happens if you do fight Conor?
I do believe that I knock him out in the second round. Immediately from the first bell, I meet him in the center, and I immediately start making him second guess himself. He's gonna go downhill, and he's gonna go downhill quick, and I'm gonna see an opening, and I'm gonna get the finish. I think my standard for what hard work is so much higher than so many people I come into contact with, let alone Conor, you know, who has shown chinks in his armor of the lavish lifestyle that he has, enjoying the money that he has, enjoying the spotlight and the platform that he has. And all of those things take you away from keeping the main thing, and the main thing is just the work.
Two of the most exciting men to ever fight in the lightweight division will meet again with the #2 ranked Charles Oliveira taking on #6 ranked Michael Chandler in a 5-round #1 contender fight.
I think a fight like this is watching to see the actual human spirit dominate the other, to watch him wilt, to get on top of him and beat him with my fists until he gives up his neck and I snatch his soul out of his body.
Don't wish for less challenge, wish for more wisdom.
There's nothing glorious about trying to do easy things. We weren't created for our life to be easy. So instead of asking for a lighter load, just ask for a stronger back. You know, ask for the ability to withstand all the weight of the world that life is going to throw at you.
Today, we're on the other side of the globe, interviewing with UFC legend, champion, and one of the most brutal fighters in the sport, Michael Chandler. This guy is not only one of the best fighters in the world, one of the most brutal fighters in the world, but he also has this elite mindset like no other. And the reason why I get on with him so well and I'm so invested in his journey is a term that he has coined for himself called the walk-on mentality. Now, if you know about college sports, you know what a walk-on is. And college was one of those places where Michael developed this mentality. He was a walk-on at college. Eventually, he became a full ride scholarship, and then he got All-American. And now he fights in the UFC as one of the best fighters to ever grace the octagon. Michael Chandler dives into that mentality. He dives into that mindset, and also the most anticipated fight in sporting history, Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. We get to dive into the details of that and talk about manifestation and what he believes the reality of that fight will be. Take out your notebook, take out your pen, and get ready for some absolute wisdom. Today's video, as always, was powered by HUEL. You guys know I've been drinking this stuff for the last few years now, and it's been a massive part of what I do within this business and my busy lifestyle, but also a huge part of my training for the world's heaviest marathon and so much more. I always recommend you guys the Black Edition, but if you haven't tried their ready to drinks, the original is absolutely delicious. It has 20 grams of protein, 26 vitamins and minerals, and so much more packed into this little bottle. If you want to find out more, head to the link in the description, and we'll talk a little bit later about HUEL. But thank you to HUEL for making this possible. Let's dive into the incredible episode with Michael Chandler. What we usually do for the people of the show, just if they don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself and let them know your name?
My name is Michael Chandler, and if you have heard nothing about me, have no idea who I am, I was just a little guy from a little town who was taught to do little things, who became well-versed in hand-to-hand combat, first in wrestling, and then tried mixed martial arts in 2009. And I've been trying mixed martial arts at a very high level since then for 16 years. And I'm the #5 ranked lightweight in the UFC, and trying to be the best version of myself every day.
You say small town. To a British audience, how would you describe that?
You know, I'm from a small town outside of St. Louis, Missouri. So St. Louis is a larger city in the United States, but I was about 40 miles outside of the city. It was a little bit more rural, but wasn't like a farming community. It wasn't you know, in the States we call it a one stop sign town or a one traffic light town. It wasn't one of those, but it was small enough that we all stayed within our little bubble of Jefferson County, Missouri. High school was right down the road, 10 minutes. Didn't get much further outside of Jefferson County. And that's where Mike and Betty Chandler, my mom and dad, worked 2 and 3 jobs to take care of me and my 2 brothers. And that's where we started really building our life.
Yeah, that's something that really interested me. I mean, just a brief overview. What was your childhood like?
Childhood was, I think it was your typical middle class family in the United States. We played sports. We went to public school. My dad was a carpenter. Was up every morning at 5 a.m. drinking his coffee and putting on his work boots and putting on his whites, he called them, because he always wore white pants. And he would go off to work. He would come back about 3 p.m. My mom would get us ready for school. We'd go to school. She'd go work her first job. When we were younger, she would work her first job from 8 to 5, and then from 6 till midnight, she would work at my grandpa's restaurant. So while she was at the restaurant, my dad was kind of raising us at night. So we loved sports. We lived in the woods. There was 4 or 5 houses in the middle of the woods in our little neighborhood, we called it, and walked around the woods, fell out of trees, chased animals, built forts, and did kind of just normal boy stuff. And it's kind of what we did for the first decade or so of my life. I was the oldest of 3 boys, so I was kind of the first one to get into sports and the first one to get into middle school and then high school and kind of lead the charge in there. But it was very typical, just a very typical middle class family, just trying to do the best that we could and finding simple joys in the simple things. We didn't have a lot, but we weren't missing a dang thing. We had love, we had security, we had a roof over our head, we had food on our plate. I think it's a very similar theme with a lot of people across this country.
Did you recognize your mom working 2 or 3 jobs, your dad getting up at 5 a.m.? Did you recognize that as, I mean, obviously as a kid, you're probably used to, that's just the way it is, but did you draw on inspiration? Did you see the hard work and work ethic? Did they speak about those kind of themes whilst you was a kid?
I think when you're growing up in that kind of environment, it's just your normal, right? As a kid, you're trying to figure out what life is. And all I knew life was adults work, and that's what they have to do. And they were trying their best. They never complained. That was one thing about my parents. They never complained. They would work 2 and 3 jobs all the time. My dad would take side jobs, he would call them, where he'd have his normal job as a carpenter, but then he would also take side jobs on the weekend. It was just constantly scraping and clawing to try to bring more money into the family to put food on the table for 3 growing boys. Now, as a father, and having my 2 sons and realizing how I would do anything in the world for them, I have so much more respect and so much more adoration for my parents and the sacrifices that they made. But when you're young, it's just your normal, and it's what life is. But I think subconsciously, it was doing so much work inside of me to be the example of what a man is, of how hard a man works, of what a woman is, of what a wife is, and how hard she works, and how she is the glue that kind of held the family together, but yet still worked 2 jobs. And my dad was the breadwinner and the hard labor guy, but was extremely soft and loving and just an awesome man. So subconsciously, it was teaching us so many things, but consciously, it was just, you don't really think about it until you kind of become an adult and you look back and say, man, there was times I gave them a hard time, or there was times that they quote unquote didn't do enough, or there was times that they failed in certain areas, but really they were just doing the best that they could. And it's not until you grow up and get married and you have that responsibility, and then you have children, and then you have that responsibility, and then you have your career, and then you have all the things that we all struggle with, that you really realize that this thing that we call life is hard at times, and sacrifices need to be made. And once you get to that position, you have so much more respect and appreciation for what your parents did for you.
Do you think the sort of the foundations of understanding about like work ethic, as a child, your only sort of view of that would have been your parents. You go into sports, and like one of the things, I mean, I guess at the start, you'd say one of the only things that separated you was just how hard you would work and how hard you'd outwork everybody else. Like, do you think that had some impact, that seeing your parents, 5 a.m., 2 or 3 jobs, extra jobs at the weekend, it's not normal. I guess it is normal for some families, but I would say it's a rarer situation. It's not something that kids are exposed to. and then you're one of the hardest working athletes on your team, in your college, in your high school. Do you think that had some overflow?
Yeah, I think I can attest all of my work ethic to my family. I can attest all of my work ethic to how they operated. Because like I said, it was more subconscious. It was just, that was my normal. That was what I saw. And, we had a few pillars in our family. It's like, we do the right thing. We operate with integrity. We are honest. We work extremely hard. We're never late. So there was this example that they were setting for me that is exactly how I am and how I have become successful in the sports world. First in the sport of wrestling in high school and then college, and now in mixed martial arts on a world stage in the UFC. And it's also the thread and the cloth that I was cut from and the foundation that I have that I am now instilling in my two boys. So, I talk about that all the time. It's you can look at how hard I work, but I'm just a product of my upbringing. And you can look at the discipline that I have, but I'm just a product of my upbringing. You can look at all of how I live my life. And yeah, I've done some things on my own, and I can point to a few things that say, you know what, my parents did it this way, but I'm doing it this way, and I am better because of it. But ultimately, that foundation was set down in High Ridge, Missouri, at Jefferson County, Missouri, with Mike and Betty Chandler. And I see the fruits of my labor, but it was first the example that they set for me for my entire upbringing. And then it's just I think my standard for what hard work is so much higher than so many people I come into contact with. If you put 100 people out and you line them up and you say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard do you work? And you might have a guy who said, hey, I think I'm a 9 or a 10, but to me, that's a 3, So it's all about perspective. And I have my days, I have my moments of laziness. I have my moments of feeling like I cut a corner here, or I gave myself permission to just chill and relax. And we have to have those moments as human beings, or we become robots, right? But ultimately, if you look at the body of work and the body of work put in and the hours put in and the reps put in, I think I'm just head and shoulders above so many people that I'm around. And I want the younger generation, the people that are looking up to me, I want parents to say, hey, look at that guy as an example for how you should be and how you should continue to grow up. And I want my peers and the younger fighters and the younger athletes or younger entrepreneurs to say, hey, if he can do it and he can work that hard, then I'm going to glean a little bit of inspiration from that. And if I can come even close to that, I'm going to find success in life.
When you fall short, how loud's sort of the inner voice, talking to you, asking for more? And what does it say? What do you say to yourself?
I think his voice is different now than it used to be. I think when I was in college, it was like all I would hear. It was a constant, hey, you're getting a little bit too close to success. Let's dummy it down a little bit. Let's bring ourselves back down to mediocre. Hey, you're about to wrestle this guy who's ranked way ahead of you. You're not supposed to beat him. Make sure you don't beat him, because that might be a little bit uncomfortable, right? Or then when I would beat somebody who I wasn't supposed to beat, and all of a sudden I start climbing the rankings, or I get the starting spot at Mizzou, that inner voice says, wait a second, that's not what we do. We're not winners. We're a small guy from a small town who was supposed to do small things, right? So I was constantly battling that guy, that little guy. And I liken it now to, putting that voice to rest, or slaying that dragon. Like some dragons we're able to slay and we move on and we say, hey, I blossomed from this. But some dragons we just get really good at pushing into a corner and managing them. And I have this little visualization of this little guy from this little town who was taught to do little things, but I've just gotten really good at duct taping him to the basement of my mind and say, hey, I love you. I've needed you. You have helped me get to where I am. However, I don't need you anymore. I need you to keep me humble. I need you to keep me grounded. I need you to keep me down to earth here and there. But ultimately, you are in my past, and I love you, and I'm going to take you with me, and we're going to go to the top together. But I'm not going to let you rule me and rule my mind and rule the governor that is the success of Michael Chandler's life.
Speak to that though. When you were younger then, that inner voice of not being enough, not being capable, and almost being in this internal battle with yourself to prove yourself wrong, prove that you are capable. What was that like?
I think the greatest humility is a very, very interesting thing to me. I think the greatest thing that we can be is humble, right? There's nothing better than a humble champion. There's nothing better than a man or a woman who finds massive amounts of success, yet we sit in these kind of interactions usually, and you think, man, I thought a person of his stature, a man of his success, a woman of her accolades would be a little bit more pompous, a little bit more full of themselves, a little bit more harsh, right? So humility is a superpower, especially in today's day and age when we're so self-consumed and we're so braggadocious and we're so flashy, right? But for me, humility held me back so much because, it's like the Nelson Mandela quote, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond belief. And he says, who are you not to be successful and beautiful and accomplish these things? There's nothing enlightened about watering yourself down so that other people don't feel insecure around you. And I feel like that's what I always did. It was always like, okay, well, I can find some success, but I don't want to become too successful because what if the people around me think that that I think I'm better than them, right? And I think that can be a superpower because you care about other people and you want to bring people with you and you care about how you come off and you care about how you affect other people's lives. But it can also be your greatest foothold and your greatest stumbling block, because if you're constantly self-sabotaging yourself just to make sure you don't perform so well or create a life so beautiful and blissful that other people feel insecure around you. So I think that was the deep-seated battle, an inner battle that I was constantly dealing with. And then you get a little bit older and you realize, man, okay, it's been decades now that I've put this work in. It's been decades now that I've operated with integrity. It's been decades now that I observe who I'm around and how hard I work. And wait a second, I deserve to be successful and I deserve to get to a crazy amount of success. And if people want to form their opinions, that's fine. But ultimately, I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I also know what I was created for. So I've given myself more and more permission as the years go by to realize these dreams are something that aren't just attainable, but they are almost a requirement that I need to do, that I need to go tackle in order to reach as many people as I possibly can.
Surprisingly, I think that idea of not being enough and putting yourself down is amongst high achievers, I think is quite frequent. I think like you say, a lot of people's perception is that people are braggadocious, people are out there, and it exists. Don't get me wrong, it definitely exists. But I think a lot of people struggle with that internal battle, and I think that's where there's this huge growth from. Not putting yourself down, not being. At times, I think it's required though, but not being so negative.
I actually just had this conversation with somebody, and I love the idea of therapy, and I love the idea of engaging in things. There was something called neurofeedback, where they're checking out your brain and they talk about the alpha and the beta and the delta and the theta waves and all these different things. And I was going over my brain map because I just got the analysis done, and I had the expert, the therapist, the lady say, talk about these certain areas of my brain and say, hey, do you have a problem with holding yourself to a high standard? Or do you have a problem with, getting down on yourself whenever you make a mistake? Or do you have a problem with, this self-deprecating thoughts and these things? And I had a moment there where I didn't want to push back because I know I could probably be better at it. But at some point, I do believe that we need these things. If you hold yourself to a high standard, it's okay to say, you know what, Michael, you messed up here. You're better than that. You are more disciplined than that. You are kinder than that. You hold yourself to a standard in which you need to operate a certain way. So I think we don't want to become so much of a fixer of these things that really have made us successful too, right? Like if I didn't hold myself to a high standard, if I wasn't hard on myself, if I didn't expect a lot out of myself, would I be sitting here today talking to you? Could I be better at them? Is there a fine balance? Maybe. But a lot of times those are the catalysts for continued growth to get yourself to the next level.
I definitely think that to begin with, you need that. Like you have to have that. I think maybe there's like an inflection point where greatness lies slightly beyond it, and like realizing that I think there's that point to realize you are great, and that maybe that voice needs to be quietened down a little bit. So it's really interesting. Again, I said that I'd listened to the Rogan podcast, and I think that's, you'd started talking about that sort of inflection point for yourself, and I thought it was fantastic the way the conversation went. So we'll touch on that, but just to pull it back a little bit, I'm curious as to, I spoke to you about this earlier, so I'm asking you to repeat yourself, but physically as a child, like were you a phenom? Was you an athlete? Like where people were like, that kid needs to get into sport, like he's built, like what was this sort of outward look from other people and, from yourself? Like when you looked in the mirror as a kid, what did you look like? And was it obvious at that time?
No, what was obvious was that I was undersized on every team that I was on. I was one of the smallest, if not the smallest, on every baseball team, every soccer team, every football team. Obviously, that's why I gravitated towards wrestling. Wrestling, there's weight classes. You got your heavyweight, who's 250, and you got your 98 pounder, your 103 pounder. And I thought, okay, well, this sport is for 103 pounders. This sport's for 112 pounders. This sport's for 119 pounders, guys that are my size, right? I think back to Little League Baseball, and me and my cousin Ryan were the two smallest kids. We were about the same size, and every other kid was 3 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches taller than us, 20, 40, 50, 60 pounds heavier than us, cranking the ball, guys hitting triples all the way to the fence. And me and cousin Ryan were smaller, and we were undersized, but we were fast, and we ran as hard as we possibly could. We were smart. We were good with catching and moving, and we were utility type of players. So I think that was the story that was being told to me subconsciously, like, right, well, you're different than all the other kids because you're smaller. You're different than all the other kids because you are shorter, you're lighter, you're looked at as the smallest kid on the team. And I never really got made fun of or anything like that. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was bullied or I was really truly self-conscious about it. Of course, yeah, I wish I was as tall as my cousin Frankie, or I wish I was as big as Gabe, on the team, who was, way like hit puberty at like 11 years old. And, I didn't have hair in my armpits until I was 18 years old. But I think that, so subconsciously it was saying, hey, you're different in this way. But I was more of a late bloomer. And now the man you see today and the body that I have built, I didn't really hit my peak until I was in my mid-20s, and then now I still feel it at 38 years old. I feel like I'm 25 years old, in energy and athleticism and all those different things. So everybody is on a different path, right? And everybody has different genetic gifts. And me, I was just more of a late bloomer. So I definitely didn't have any gifts aside from, man, that kid listens. Man, that kid is attentive. Man, that kid can take direction. Man, that kid is coachable. Man, that kid runs really hard. He swings really hard. He tries really hard. That was the only thing that I had that a lot of other people didn't have. But I wouldn't have had that if I didn't feel like I was the runt of the litter, if I didn't feel like I was the smallest guy on the team, if I didn't feel like I had to overcompensate with attention to detail and running faster and harder than anybody else and trying harder than anybody else. So I was not athletically gifted, aside from the fact that I was willing to try harder than everyone else.
The thing that matters. Thing that matters. Do you remember the first experience stepping onto a wrestling mat?
I do, yeah, and we have it taped actually, because I wasn't even supposed to be there. So my first match I wrestled when I was in Little League for a couple of years. I started when I was 5, and I only wrestled till about 8, 9 years old. It was just too hard. I think about my son Hap right now, who's 7, and they lose a baseball game, no big deal. They lose a football game, no big deal. The team lost. Hap didn't lose. the team lost, right? So the sport of wrestling and those individual sports are very tough on a young kid, right? So when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I would lose matches. I lost to a girl. So I ended up just quitting. I'm like, hey, I don't really want to wrestle anymore. Maybe my parents pulled me from it and said, hey, it's just too hard on him. He's too young. Let him go play the team sports. And I started back up as a freshman in high school. I had met our high school wrestling coaches. They are twins, Bob and Ron Wilhelm. They were awesome. They heard I used to wrestle and I was friends with some wrestlers. So I came out and started wrestling, and I wasn't supposed to wrestle varsity at all, but our 103 pounder couldn't make weight that early. Something happened with the weight. So I ended up wrestling varsity, my first match ever. And I ended up winning the match. I think I got a pin against Marquette High School, Michael Johnson's high school, actually. I believe it was Marquette High School. And, once that happened, it was like, dang, maybe I can be pretty good at this thing. And then I just poured myself into it. And I was the first kid ever who wrestled over the summer. I found a wrestling club that I went to. So the season would end and I would go wrestle over the summer. And I was the only kid at my high school that did that. But I remember stepping on the mat that first time thinking, man, I'm not supposed to be here. A week ago, I wasn't told that I was going to be wrestling this match, because you're a 14-year-old kid, freshman in high school, had only really been wrestling for about a year. I wasn't supposed to be on that varsity match. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. I guess I'll just go let it fly and see what happens. And then obviously I won the match. So I think that was the moment that it was like, okay, hand-to-hand combat might be my thing. If I work really hard at this thing, and I know the guys, they might be older than me, but they're the same weight as me, I can go out there and beat anybody.
Was there a moment where it kind of like spilled over and you was like, yeah, this is it, I love this?
I mean, I think as I started gaining momentum my freshman year, I loved the individuality of it, even though, so maybe there was a little bit of like kind of proving people wrong a little bit, because, when I was on a baseball team, I wasn't the best kid on the team, but I was definitely the smallest kid on the team. Football, same thing. The other team sports, same thing. But wrestling, we were a team, but my teammates sat on the bench while I went out there and wrestled. And I was wrestling a guy my size. So I think I just started gaining momentum, and I was thinking, this makes sense to me. My dad works his tail off. My mom works their tail off. They are hard-nosed, constantly get after it type of people. I wonder if this kid has that, right? That's just who we are. The Chandlers outwork everybody, and we can work hard and good things happen. So I wonder if this kid has that. And I would go out there and I would win. And I wasn't great, in high school. Those first couple of years, I ended up qualifying for state but didn't place in state, but I was having a good amount of success. So I think it was just this, we're the Chandlers and we work extremely hard, and this is how we operate. And I don't know if this kid has that. So let me go see if he has it. And a lot of them didn't. So I was able to win some matches, and it just started clicking. And then sophomore year, all of a sudden you're ranked in state. And then junior year, all of a sudden you're ranked in the top 5 in the state. And then senior year, all of a sudden you're another number 1, number 2 kid in the state. I ended up in the state finals. I lost in the state finals, took second. And yeah, that's how it all went.
With our audience, sometimes I like to try and get a story that would sort of capture certain things. And I think when you were in high school, you sort of found the sport. There's a lot of kids who are also working really hard. There's, like we spoke about earlier, like everyone thinks they're working hardest, all that kind of stuff. Was there a story or a particular thing that you used to do that would sort of explain what your work rate was like? Maybe certain times of the morning you were getting up, or certain drills you did, or there's the classic sort of scenes of guys working out in the rain and the snow and all that kind of stuff. Like, were there things that you were doing that were just the other kids weren't doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very apparent when, you can become the outcast because you're not a hard worker. You could become an outcast because you don't buy into what a team is doing. You could become an outcast because you don't work as hard. You don't bring the value. You're not in a forward trajectory toward the mission of a team, right? But you can also become an outcast by being the hardest worker and the one that does the most and the one who listens the most and the one who the coaches love the most, right? You can become an outcast that way too. And I don't think I became an outcast, but I definitely remember kind of being made fun of a little bit that I was wrestling all summer long. Kind of a territory war, because when you go wrestle in a club, I was wrestling with and started becoming friends with the kids from Fox High School and the kids from Seckman High School and the kids from Oakville High School and the kids from Marquette High School and the kids from all these other teams, right? So you had freshman year, this guy loses to a kid from Fox, but then all of a sudden over the summer, this guy kind of becomes my friend, my teammate over the summer, and we're wrestling in these other tournaments, and I was the only guy doing it. So then all of a sudden, the guy on my team in high school says, well, wait a second, you're friends with Bobby, or you're friends with Joe? Like, what's going on here? And I was just like, hey man, I'm here to wrestle. This is what I do. Wrestling is now my life. And I can't become a state champion and become the best version of the wrestler I'm supposed to be if I just wrestle at Northwest High School from, September, October till February. I'm going to go 12 months a year. I'm going to go 365 days a year if I can. I'm going to go compete in these other tournaments. I'm going to go wrestle with these other schools. I'm going to go wrestle with these other people. So I think that was one of the first times where I started realizing, oh shoot, okay, when people see something that they wish they could be, or they see something that they wish they had, they will try to pull you back down to where they are, right? And there was nothing wrong with the guys that I was wrestling with in high school, but I was the first one who went off and I was doing more than them, right? So it was like you had your wrestling season and you had guys on our team that were decently successful who just wrestled during that season that was 3-4 months long, but then all of a sudden I would go wrestle another 4, 5, 6 months, almost get 2 more full seasons over the summertime in the off season than they had. So now all of a sudden I've put in 4 years or 4 seasons of work after they've only put in 1 season. And I kind of became a little bit of an outcast in that way. And I think maybe that had a little bit to do with it, right? Because obviously I'm going through, I'm becoming a young man now and starting to notice girls and how girls are looking at me and how the other guys are looking at me, how the coaches are looking at me. And you're kind of you're forming your opinion of what being a young man is, right? It's like I was a kid and now all of a sudden I'm in high school and I'm starting to be forming my vision of what a man is. So then in that regard, maybe it did affect me a little bit to where it's like, oh, well, shoot, man, like I don't want to make these people feel bad that they're not working hard, right? I don't want to make these people feel like I think I'm better than them. I don't think I'm better than them. I'm just on my own journey and I'm running my own race, right? And that still to this day is something that is a very interesting conundrum that is going on inside of my brain and probably a lot of your viewers right now, where it's like, man, I have this goal and I have this vision and I want to pour everything into it, but I got all these people forming their opinions of it, especially now in 2024 with how connected we are via social media and everyone can weigh in and everybody has an opinion. But yeah, I think that was kind of the first time where I started to realize, okay, I'm not different than everybody else, but I am willing to work hard and I really enjoy this. And if I want to be successful, once again, it's like those teammates who didn't have that example of my mom and dad, their standard for hard work was different than mine. And my standard was head and shoulders above. So therefore that was just normal for me.
It's so interesting you say that. I think there's a perception that it's easier to pull people back down to your level than to rise to their standards. And I think some people, it swings both ways. Some people see a new standard and they rise to it and are inspired by it. And then some people want to stay where they are and try and pull people back down. Truly successful people can't be pulled back down. Like I think, it can affect you mentally at times, but as a teenager, that's interesting to me, that time period, because being pulled back down or rising above the crop also has like a bit of a social impact on you. Yeah, losing friends, and that matters. When you're at that age, it matters. And did you have like that moment where you had to, assess it and go, I maybe need to drop some of these friends, or maybe I don't need to do the things that I feel like I want to do to, impress the girls or create better friendship groups or whatever it is? Did you have a moment where you had to go through that?
I can't really think of a moment, but I just remember, if I just think about my entire high school experience as a whole, I think it was just I made that decision, and I made the decision that this is how I was going to live my life. And if the guys didn't like it, then so be it. Right. I mean, it's an individual sport.
Was you locked in like that? What I want to know is that image of you at that age, were you just obsessed with the sport?
Yeah. Yeah, I was, because I was, we all gravitate towards things that we're good at, or at least the best at. I was going to be the best at wrestling compared to all the other sports, right? I was going to be better at wrestling than I was going to be in school, better at wrestling than I was going to be as a friend, better at wrestling than I was going to be in all the other sports. And it was something that I could sink my teeth into. And it was also accountability. That's one thing. I mean, I can think about so many painful times, so many tears that were cried, so much embarrassment, so much horrible things that have happened, or feelings that I've felt because I've been in individual sports, wrestling, and now mixed martial arts, in front of millions of people for the entire world to point their finger at me and laugh and make fun of me, right? So much pain, but there's so much freedom in accountability. There's so much freedom in knowing that it doesn't matter how you perform, how he performs. I'm showing up and I'm going to toe that line and I'm going to come forward, and I get to be the master of my fate today. And if I have an off day, I have an off day. But if I win, I get my hand raised, and it was me who got my hand raised, So it's a blessing and a curse, and it's a double-edged sword, but ultimately it's the best path for that personal accountability. And that personal accountability of an individual athlete, an individual sport athlete, spills over into every single aspect of my life. I never in my marriage am looking outside and saying, okay, who made this happen? Who made this disagreement happen? Why is this disagreement happen? Oh, wait a second. It's the man in the mirror. In my business, who made this happen? Oh, no, it's the man in the mirror. Who fell short as a father today? Who made me do this? No, it's the man in the mirror, And I think that's what we're losing more and more in today's society, is that we are forgetting that we are the masters of our fate, and we alone, the ownness rests solely on our shoulders. When everybody else is pointing fingers and everybody else wants to find a reason why they're not successful, the self-sufficient among us continue to rise, because they know there's only one person who is in charge. There's only one person who is the master of their fate every single day. The sun comes up and the sun comes down, and there's nobody out there, no president being elected, no economy ups or economy downs, no stock markets, no bad luck, nothing that can stop you if you continue to move forward and realize that it's you who is the master of your own fate.
It's so interesting you say that. I'd say the last 5 years, that sort of idea of being a victim, poor situations, difficult times, has been more of a conversation. And for me, it's something I struggled with to create content around or interview people around, because it has been, present in conversation. Ultimate accountability is liberation. Like, it's so powerful, and it completely would change your life. But the story is not that, the conversation that people have is not that. And so many people are quick to jump to, well, what about this? It's like, no, ultimate accountability means ultimate accountability. I love that. Again, like you've mentioned, you've joked about it today at times, like certain things, but I feel that you embody it completely. When did you realize, like, when was the moment you were like, accountability has it just always been present?
I think there's always been an aspect of it to me, having parents who worked extremely hard and never made excuses. My parents never, ever made excuses for anything. And then being in an individual sport, watching the match unfold, right? If I lost the match, it was because he was the better man that match, or I didn't do what I needed to do, and that was it, right? But then ultimately too, getting into the sport of mixed martial arts and then changing my perception as soon as I took those straps off the singlet for the last time at Mizzou in St. Louis, Missouri in 2009 at the NCAA tournament, I vowed to myself, when I go into mixed martial arts, I'm not going to have the same cycle of self-sabotage that I have had over the last 5 years, because I underperformed so much. And then coming into mixed martial arts and having massive success right away, becoming 12-0 world champion, number 5 in the world, 7, 8, 9 first round finishes. Like, it was a crazy rise to the top. But then I had my first loss and then realized I was losing the battle between my ears. That ultimately made me realize, wait a second, okay, I don't have this self-sabotage anymore, but now I started pointing fingers and blaming things on other people. And I needed that. And I look back and I'm a little bit ashamed or I'm a little bit embarrassed of it, but I needed that to turn into the man that I am today, to think, okay, I'm never going to go back to that guy, that version of myself. And that would be the moment, that 688 day span where I lost those 3 fights in a row, where I realized that the cavalry isn't coming, and I can choose to feel sorry for myself, and I can choose to point fingers, and I can choose to blame, and I can choose to make excuses, or I can take extreme ownership of this life I have, extreme accountability, ultimate accountability of what I can and should create with my life. And there's nobody that can stop me if I continue to just operate within my strengths and run my own race.
The choice, of graduating high school, had multiple Div 3, Div 2 scholarship offers, and then you decided to walk on to go Div 1. What was that moment like?
Man, that was it was the scariest moment of my life leading up to that point. For some reason, something in me said, if I'm going to wrestle, I'm going to wrestle at the highest level. I have to wrestle at the highest level. I would rather be, once again, I've been here before. I was the smallest kid on the baseball team. Was it a little bit embarrassing? Did I wish I was bigger? Did I wish I was more talented? Yeah, but I've been here before. So I knew walking onto a Division I team, the University of Missouri, who was a top 15 ranked team in the country at the time, I knew I was going to be the lowest guy on the totem pole, but something in me said, go do that, because you'd rather start at the bottom, and there's only one way to go, than to go take a scholarship at Division II, Division III. In best case scenario, and also worst case scenario, you go win a national title, win multiple national titles, find crazy amount of success, go undefeated, but then know that you left more in the tank because you could have went Division I, and how would that have played out? So I think back to, okay, I could have went Division II, NAIA, become a 4-time national champ, and completely undefeated, never lost a match. That to me was not as enticing as going to the University of Missouri, rolling the dice, putting in all the hard work, dedicating myself, and then maybe I end up on the All-American podium. A lot less accolades in Division I compared to what I would have been able to do, but something in me said, go take that leap. And I remember we were in this little silver 1990s Aerostar van that my parents drove us to Columbia, Missouri in. And I remember pulling up to Baker Park dorm room, and I'm sitting in the back, nervous as all get out, because I knew who the guys in my recruiting class were. State champion from California, state champion from Illinois, state champion from Pennsylvania, state champion from North Carolina, state champion, the guy who beat me in the state finals, state champion at 152 pounds, Laramie Schaefer, was in that dorm as I was coming in, right? And I saw Marcus Hayne walking up, and I said, oh, there's Joey Garrity. Oh, there's Raymond Jordan. And there's all these guys, all the guys that I was like, okay, this is my recruiting class. And I just remember as each one of them walked in, I said, okay, well, I'm not as good as that guy. I'm not as good as that guy. Definitely not as good as that guy, But I remember that fear / excitement of, even if I fail, I'm at least going to try to do something that everybody back in Jefferson County, Missouri was questioning. Every single one of them. I was like, why don't you just take the Division II scholarship? Why don't you just go to Missouri Baptist? Why don't you just go do this? From parents to coaches to teammates to friends, it seemed astronomical because nobody went and did that. It's just not what we do. This is what we do here in Jefferson County, Missouri. We don't go do what you're about to do. Are you sure you want to do this? So there was this little bit of excitement, massive amount of fear. And I just remember that. I'll never forget that there was a little cul-de-sac there that it kind of dead ended, and our van parked right there. And, we had some little Tupperware containers and my clothes and my wrestling shoes and all the little things I was about to go take to my dorm. And I was like, man, I'm about to do something crazy. And maybe I should have listened to them, but I'm not going to. And let's go roll the dice. And that's true for that's true for most 18-year-olds who go off to university and go off to college. It's a new experience. You're leaving your mom and dad. Their mom and dad are back home, and you're going off on your own. You're becoming a quote unquote adult. so to speak. So there was that aspect of it. But for me, it was, man, I'm about to go do something that everybody said I shouldn't be doing. And then it all worked out.
Yeah, that when you're able to dream big, usually those dreams have the opinions of others. It's over that. So you're going to have, people trying to have your best interest and tell you not to do it.
Yeah, and that's how I felt a lot.
Yeah.
It really was, and that's with parenting, and that's and even me, right? And I have 2 boys now, and especially my son Hap, who's old enough now where we're having these conversations, and I'm like, man, I should have just let him experience this instead of trying to save him from the pain or save him from the failure or save him from the mistake or save him from doing it wrong. It's just what parents do, and it's what coaches do, and it's what mentors do. It's what all the people that I was around, it came from a loving, protective place, but it was also stifling my progress.
I think when you can take that leap of faith though, and land yourself in a situation where the standards are better than you, everybody around you is better than you, you'll either sink or swim. And I love that. I think that's just a great position to put yourself in.
Yeah. Well, luckily it worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
it could have, and I think I always thought about the alternative too. And I remember thinking, like if I would rather go to Mizzou and wrestle for Brian Smith and him not pay any attention to me for 5 years and never get to put on the Mizzou singlet and ride the bench, be a workout partner, be a towel boy, be the guy who's just kind of hanging around but doesn't have the talent. He's not one of the starters. He's not one of the captains. He's not one of the guys. I liked the prospect of that even more than going to a lesser, I don't want to use the word lesser, but for me, that was what it felt like for me in that time period.
Yeah, big fish in a small pond. Yeah. You could have easily chosen that, and
then it happened years later when I was making the decision to go from Bellator to the UFC. But that's for a later conversation, I'm sure.
What's the snapshot of walking on to the graduation? Like, what's that like?
Man, it was, the college environment breaks people. The college wrestling environment. Let me rephrase that. Like, everyone on campus, everyone in the athletic department, everyone knew the wrestlers were different. The wrestlers worked harder. The wrestlers put more time in. The wrestlers had to do 10 times the amount of work that the football team had to do and the baseball team had to do and the soccer team had to do just to be average, just to be mediocre. That was just what we did. It was our culture. It was how we were going to go from top 15 to top 10, top 10 to top 5. And Brian Smith was a hell of a leader. And he held us to a high standard. And so I knew the hard work wasn't going to be a problem. It was going to take some time, because I could handle the pain. I could handle the workouts. You weren't going to break me. You weren't going to finish me. You weren't going to make me quit. You weren't going to do anything that was going to make me not finish the workout. I might not be first, but I'm definitely going to finish. Right. And, week after week, during the preseason, during the pre-preseason where guys are getting in the room, and then into the preseason where the coaches are really weeding out, okay, who really wants this? Who's willing to stick around? Who's willing to go run the hill? Who's willing to go run the 7-miler? Who's willing to go do the stadium run that everybody talked about? People puking and passing out. Who's willing to put in the hours? Who's willing to take the beatings? Who's willing to do this? Will the willing stand up and show me who you are? And those who are not willing, finish your classes and go home, because we appreciate your contribution, but we don't need you, and it really was like that. And week after week, guys were quitting. The guy who beat me in the state finals, he quit. The guy, the state champ from California, who was our #1 recruit, he ended up quitting halfway through the season. You hear the moans and the groans, and the guys who would complain, and the workload of school and the workload of wrestling, and the workload for wrestling was a lot more than the workload for school. And it was hard balance. And I always heard it. And that was the first time that I heard, man, these guys are complaining about this opportunity that we have. They're complaining about the position that we are in. So I think I was just so grateful. And that's where that humility, because humility and gratitude are like, they're connected so well and so intertwined, because when you have the humility, you're just happy to have the opportunity, right? So I was so happy to have the opportunity. So therefore I was operating in gratitude. So the pain didn't feel like pain. My pain with the amount of gratitude I had was a lot less painful than the other guy next to me in my same weight class who didn't feel the gratitude to be there. So the pain was just a byproduct, and the pain was just something to ignore, and the hours and the workload and the stress and the pressure, it was never a negative because it was all threaded through and seen through the lens of gratitude. And guys were quitting left and right. And then by the end of the year, I had kind of a 500 record, did decent. By my second year, made the team at 157 pounds, made it to nationals. Second year, made it to nationals. Third year, became a team captain and was ranked in the country, and made it to nationals again, and self-sabotaged myself again. But senior year, I finally got on the All-American podium, took fifth, and then that chapter was closed.
That's incredible, man. So I love the walk-on mentality. I love it. I love when you speak about that. Do you remember a specific moment when coaches tried to break you? Is there anything that stands out?
Not me, but I witnessed it firsthand, just watching guys who weren't, because a coach's job is to, especially in college, this isn't the little leagues anymore. This isn't Pee-wee football. This isn't Pee-wee wrestling. Either you want to be here or you don't. You're on a scholarship. Most of the guys, that were around me were on scholarships and I wasn't, right? So that was always kind of a little bit of a feather in my cap where it's like, man, look at the walk-on over here, just doing laps around people, willing and able. He will run through that brick wall for us right now. And I got this blue chip recruit who's on a scholarship, and I can't get him to get good grades, and I can't get him to show up to class, and I can't get him to put in the extra work that we expect out of a Division I wrestling team. But there was never a moment. I think I would never use the word favorite, right? But when you do the work and you hold yourself to a higher standard, coach doesn't need to worry about you. He just knows you're a work in progress and you will continue to get better. But it's the guys who weren't doing things right that he would just constantly try to put them through the ringer to just do himself a favor and them a favor by just getting them off the team. And it sounds harsh, but that's life. That is how life is. Life is not all sunshine and rainbows. And it's seeing that as an example of who I don't want to be, while also having a little bit of empathy, thinking, man, maybe if they held themselves to a higher standard, or maybe if they had a better example, or maybe if they had a little bit more gumption. But I think college was definitely when I started separating myself from people where I, at some point, did not care whatsoever what people thought about me. And I would excommunicate people and keep them out of my life. And I would only hang out with these guys. These are the guys who are doing things right. And you guys can kick rocks. And that's when I kind of started to separate myself. And I didn't care what you thought about me, because I'm here for a mission, and these guys are here for a mission, and that coach is here for a mission. And that coach is missing his son's Little League baseball game right now to be here with us, and you are disrespecting him by not giving your all. So do us all a favor and see ya. So I just watched him just constantly break people. I watched him tell somebody he would rip their heart out if they had one. And it was looking back on it, it was probably one of the funniest things I ever heard in my life. He was talking to him and he said, "I would rip your effing heart out if you had one." It was one of my favorite quotes I ever heard in my entire life.
Oh, that's rough.
But it was absolute chaos, right? And it was like, gosh, I'm scared of that man, but yet I love that man, and I would die for that man. Like I 100% for sure, from 2004 to 2009, I would have died for Brian Smith. I would have taken a bullet for that man. I would have ran out in front of a bus because I was so dedicated to the cause. Right. And that's, it sounds a little nutty to some people, but man, if you're not all in, then what are you doing? Like if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, what are you doing? What are you here for? Don't waste my time. Stay away from me. And maybe it rubs people the wrong way, but it's just how I've conditioned myself.
I know, I freaking love it. If you're like me and millions of other people, you probably lead a busy life, and that's where this stuff comes in absolutely clutch. I know that I just scoop, shake, and go, and I'm ready for my day. There are other companies that are trying to do what HUEL is trying to do, but they use cheap ingredients. Sometimes it requires you to take 15 pills, or preparing food, trusting supplements with subpar ingredients, and also taking 15 pills a day is just something that we don't all want to do. That's where HUEL makes health possible. Black Edition has 40 grams of protein in, 26 vitamins and minerals, and every single ingredient inside this has been carefully selected by HUEL's expert team. So you know you're getting the good stuff. Don't just take my word for it. Millions of other people around the world are now using HUEL as part of their daily routine. People like Idris Elba, Stephen Bartlett from the Diary of a CEO, Hardest Geezer, the man who ran the entire length of Africa, was using this stuff. If you want to join the movement, go to the link down below where you can get a free t-shirt, a free shaker, and also if you subscribe to HUEL, you can get 10% off every single order. This is next freaking level. Go get some. The transition to college into fighting, you said, and also just sort of the end of college, you said that Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley were quite big mentors. Would you say the word mentors was the right word?
Yeah, I always call them my big brothers. You know, it's like I was the oldest of three boys. I didn't have a big brother. And college was when my freshman year I came in, and Tyron was from St. Louis. So we kind of knew each other a little bit more than, we weren't close at all, but it's like he knew who I was because I was a St. Louis kid, and I knew who he was. Obviously, he was an All-American from St. Louis and one of the prides of St. Louis. And he grabbed me and was just like, "Hey, man, I need you to come drill with me." And I'm like, "Me? Like I don't even really know how to wrestle compared to you, I remember that was being more, I was more nervous for that than I was almost anything else, because you got a returning All-American, a team captain. He's a senior on the team, and wrestling can get rough, and wrestling, things can happen, headbutts and cuts, and go in for a shot and tweak a guy's knee, or go too hard, and there's these things where it's like, he's a prized possession of this program, and he's asking me to come in at 6 a.m. to do his individual drill work before practice. And then also he's grabbing me after practice to do more individual workout in the evening after practice to go toward his goals. And that's when I really started to realize, hey, yeah, I'm here to serve him, but I'm also getting better in my own regard. And I'm also through osmosis, I'm learning how an All-American thinks, how an All-American wrestles, how an All-American goes, the pace that he keeps, the moves that he's hitting, all these different things. And he was the first one. And then he graduates and sticks around for another year. And then that second year was when Ben Askren really started to be like, "Hey, man, you just got the starting job and we need you on this team. You're our starting 157 pounder. I'm going to pour into you." And both of those guys just, to me, they hung the moon. They were the guys that I was like, man, okay, if you believe in me. They believed in me so much more than I believed in myself. And Coach Smith believed in me so much more than I believed in myself. So then that was when I was, really just like, okay, I want to wrestle hard for myself and hard for Coach Smith, but I also want to wrestle hard for these guys, and I want to go win matches for these guys as well. And then obviously they both started fighting when they graduated, and I still was 100% laser focused on becoming a national champion and All-American, and didn't really think about the sport of mixed martial arts much. And then as soon as I graduated, toward the end of my senior year, I didn't really fall out of love with wrestling, but I knew wrestling was not going to be my path forward, because I wasn't going to make the Olympic team, nor did I really want to make the Olympic team compared to going into mixed martial arts. And then went into MMA right after.
Were those guys quite influential of you joining the sport of mixed martial arts? Did they say, like, look, this would be a good route for you to take?
Yeah, because there's different kinds of wrestlers, right? There's the real slick technician, there's the guy who's really good on his feet. There's the guy who's not that good on his feet, but he's good on top and bottom. And then there's a guy like me, who I was much more of a high pace scrapper than I was a technician. So if you take that kind of guy who isn't afraid of a fight, who isn't afraid of the headbutts, who isn't afraid to push a guy out of bounds or get pushed out of bounds, maybe say a little something to him to get into his head. They were like, "Hey, man, I don't know if you'll be good at mixed martial arts, but you got the mentality. I don't know if you can throw a punch. I don't know if you got good hands, but you can obviously wrestle decent, and you are got a little bit of a screw loose when it comes to competition. You're this nice little meek kid from High Ridge, Missouri, but when it comes to competition time, when you're in the wrestling room, you're not afraid of conflict. You actually run toward conflict instead of away from it. And I said, well, all right. I mean, Tyron was undefeated at that time. Ben was undefeated at that time. Tyron had 7 amateur fights and then had now 2 or 3 pro wins, and Ben now had 2 or 3 pro wins by the time I graduated. And they're like, hey, this thing's pretty good, man. We're making money. You've been wrestling for free for 5 years, and now we're making money. And it wasn't a lot of money, a couple $1,000, $500 here, $500 there, but they were getting wins on their record. And they're like, why don't you come over and just come train with me and throw some hands? And I need a training partner anyway, and I trust you. You know, I've been training with you for the last 4 years. Let's go try it, and then we'll get you a fight and we'll see what happens. And I graduated in May of 2009, fought my first fight at Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri in August of 2009, just a couple months after I graduated, and figured I'd try it, and I've been trying it ever since.
Obviously in your wrestling career, yeah, you were tough, but when you watch some of your fights, you're like brutal. You know, it's a bloodbath. It's absolutely some of the most exciting fight of the year multiple times. What was that transition like to becoming like, I don't know, this brutal fighter?
Man, I mean, to me, I don't really feel much of a difference. You know, I'm looking at you right now. You got 2 arms and 2 legs. You got a target on your face. You got a target on your body, right? Like it's hand-to-hand combat. Like I understand how the body reacts when I pull on your neck, and I understand how your body reacts when I grab your left leg, or if I grab your right leg, or if I shoot a high crotch. I understand what it feels like to be in the referee's position or in the guard or all these different positions. So to me, yeah, now a guy has a fist that he can clinch and punch you in the face, but it didn't feel any more brutal than the sport of wrestling. And I think anybody who hasn't wrestled, or they've only wrestled in high school, they don't realize the actual combat that is happening in the Division I college wrestling room, especially because that's where you can break the rules and there's no referee and there's no repercussions, and fights happen and punches are thrown and mother FUs are said and spitting in people's faces in like that college wrestling environment. And then of course we apologize because we're teammates and we all love each other. But it's like, for this 7 minutes right now, you are not my teammate. You are not my friend. Right. So it didn't seem any different to me. Right. It was hand-to-hand combat with a different rule set. And now, if anything, there's more rules. And I was more excited about the prospect of me having more weapons than I used to have. And I was not worried about the other guy's weapon. I always thought, it was like, well, a guy can punch me in the face. I've pretty much been punched in the face a bunch of times. I've been headbutted. I've been kicked in the face on accident. You know, like I've taken knees to the face. I've taken shins to the face. I've taken feet to the face, hard ones. And they were all inadvertent in the scrambles and different wrestling positions. So the conflict and the prospect of blunt force trauma didn't really scare me. I was just excited that I had more tools to work with, and I had 2 fists, and I had 2 knees, and I had 2 feet, 2 shins, and I could use my wrestling. So, the first fight, all I did was go out there and I took the guy down and I threw about 200 something punches on top of him till the ref pulled me off and I got my first TKO. That was my first experience in mixed martial arts. I got a $500 check and been doing it ever since.
What was that? The mentality towards the opponent, was there a difference in wrestling? Obviously you're trying to pin somebody, you're trying to win. When you're trying to knock somebody out or, beat them to their unconscious, was there a mentality shift there?
No, it's a good question because I get asked that all the time. They're just like, hey, how do you harness the aggression, or at what point does that switch get flipped and you turn into a guy who wants to inflict bodily harm? And to me, wrestling was very similar. It's like I was constantly trying to put you in pain. I was constantly trying to put you in awkward positions. I was constantly trying to inflict self-doubt on you. I just couldn't hit you when really I kind of could. There was legal hitting, clubbing a guy's head or cross-facing a guy. You can get away with certain things. And obviously you want to do it within the confines of the rules. But there was conflict happening, and there was blunt force trauma happening, right? So it was kind of just the same exact mentality, except now I've always looked at the sport of mixed martial arts like that. I never really thought like, oh, I hope this punch lands and it knocks them out, or it cuts them, or it wobbles them. It was more just like, hey, there's a target and I got a fist and it's about to go from point A to point B. And then we'll go to the next sequence. We'll go to the next move. We'll go to the next position. Cause yeah, I mean, in mixed martial arts, it looks, especially when you watch my fight, it looks like I'm trying to kill somebody. It looks like I am angry. It looks like I am just hell bent on inflicting bodily harm, but I'm not really consciously thinking that way. I just know I have a job to do, and you got 2 arms and 2 legs, and you got a target on your face and a target on your body. And I'm out there scoring points, and the more points I score, the better. And if those points or those punches or kicks lead to a knockout or a submission, it's extra style points.
I think that's what's scary about it, because seeing you train today up close, there is a absolute brutalness to it. But then the way you talk about it is more technical, clinical.
Yeah, well, and I think different guys are motivated by different things. I mean, you could bring up numerous people in mixed martial arts who have had great success, or guys that were at least decent in the sport of mixed martial arts who were like, yeah, I had a troubled childhood, or like, I suffered childhood trauma, or I was a guy who got in a bunch of street fights, so I learned how to fight and I liked fighting and figured I might as well get paid for it, where I was not that guy. I'd never been in a street fight. I was not a guy who was looking to be in fights. The idea of being in a street fight and getting arrested, or the idea of being in a fight at school and getting written up or suspended, I mean, that's so scary to me, because I never wanted to get in trouble. And now I can do it as my profession. But I look at it, even though to the onlookers and the outside, it looks like a fight, to me, it's just a competition. It's a contest between 2 men, and it gets to play out in front of millions of people.
So you rise through Bellator. What's that like? And then maybe we can speak on, again, when did the sort of thought of UFC come into play? So
I was signed with Bellator for, had to be 10 years, and it was a good run, and it was the legitimate number 2 organization in the world. I remember, because Tyron Woodley helped me make this decision. I had my first couple fights, and then at the same time, he was fighting in Strikeforce, and at the same time, Strikeforce had offered me a contract, and Bellator had offered me a contract at the same time, and I remember looking at the options, and I thought, well, Bellator is more like wrestling, because it's a tournament. You win a couple fights, then you get in the tournament, and when you get in the tournament, it's fight after fight after fight to get to the championship fight, and then you can win the belt. So to me, I had a clear path to victory: win my first 2 fights, get in the tournament, win 3 fights in the tournament, and then go fight Eddie Alvarez, who was the number 5 guy in the world. So I ended up winning the world title, and then defended the title a couple times, lost the title, won it back, lost the title, won it back. So it was just a constant up and down. And throughout the thread of the entire Bellator contract, the entire Bellator stint, because I think I signed 3 different contracts, there was two legitimate times where I thought, okay, this might be the time that it's time to go to the UFC. Because I was signing a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal, 6 fights, 4 fights, whatever they were. And when your contract is up, then you can go test the free market, and you can go take an offer from the UFC. When I won that first world title, everybody thought, man, okay, Michael Chandler, he's a new kid on the block. I think that was one of the articles that was written about me in Fighters Only magazine, or Fighters Inc., or one of the big magazines, and it had a picture of me getting my hand raised with the Bellator title, and it said new kid on the block, right? And immediately people were talking about fantasy matchups. Okay, at the time, Benson Henderson was a champion in the UFC, or then it was Anthony Pettis, and it was Frankie Edgar, and they were talking Michael Chandler versus all of these guys. But it just never felt like it was the right time for me to go to the UFC until finally in 2020, I decided I was going to fight out my Bellator contract, and I was going to go take a chance on myself, because I always thought about the 40-year-old version of me, the 42-year-old version of me, whatever age I am when I'm retired. And would I be able to rest my head on the pillow at night, knowing that I never tested myself against the best guys in the world? I knew Bellator didn't have the most talent. I knew Bellator didn't have the best guys in the world. There was some good talent there, and some of those guys could possibly have the talent to be able to fight for a world title in the UFC at the time, right? But I knew it wasn't the biggest promotion. It wasn't the brightest lights. It wasn't the biggest platform. The UFC was Division 1, and I had been fighting in Division 2, Division 3. And I thought to myself, how was the 18-year-old Michael willing and able to make that decision and take a chance on himself and bet on himself to walk on to the University of Missouri, yet the 34-year-old Michael, after all of the success and after all of the wins and after all of the evidence that I can compete with the best guys in the world, how was he not going to make that decision? And I knew that was going to eat at me for the rest of my life if I didn't do it. So I made a decision. I was going to go to the UFC, whether I took a pay cut or whether they paid me $10 million a fight. You know, I was going to go to the UFC, whether Dana loved me or Dana hated me. I was going to go to the UFC. It didn't matter. And obviously it worked out the way it worked out. My relationship with the UFC was awesome right away, and it still is to this day. I'm a valuable asset to the UFC, and it's all worked out very well. Fought for a world title, number 5, 6 in the world. And it's, I'm very happy I made that decision.
You made an impact quite quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, you know, at the time too, I'm 34 years old, multiple time world champion, highly regarded as one of the top 10 lightweights in the world. Had a reputation, entertaining fighter. I had a package that was desirable, right? But I'm also 34 years old. And I remember sitting in a meeting with Hunter Campbell, who is the number 2 in charge of the UFC. Dana's obviously the guy, he's in charge, but Hunter Campbell is kind of behind the scenes, and he was the one who I had the meeting with. And I sat with him, and I sat across the table just like this. And I said, Hunter, I don't want to come into the UFC and beat around the bush. I don't want to take any tune-up fights. I want to get thrown into the lion's den right away. Either I am who I say I am or I'm not. And I'm okay living with the answer to that question, that I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not as good as I thought I was. I'm okay with at least going to answer that question, but I need that question to be answered. So I want to fight the top guys right away. And Poirier was asked, he turned it down. Ferguson was asked, they turned it down. Dan Hooker was asked, and he said yes. And that's when I made my debut against the number 5 guy in the world. He had just went 25 minutes with Dustin Poirier, who was the number 2 guy in the world. It was fight of the night. He had his moments where people thought he was going to beat Dustin Poirier. And then I made my debut in January of 2021 on the Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 2 fight card in Abu Dhabi during COVID. Knocked out Dan Hooker in 2.5 minutes, did a backflip, ripped off a promo, and all of a sudden a star was born.
Just so I can build this out, because that's to me, that conversation with Hunter Campbell is a crucial part to the story.
Oh man, there's so many layers to that whole day. It was amazing. And
can you talk the day, like a little bit about that day?
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about taking chances. I booked a flight to Las Vegas, Nevada with 0 meeting scheduled with the UFC. And it was my wife. And you want to talk about love and support and belief. My wife, you know, because at this point, I've already made the decision. I was already negotiating with the other organizations because I was outside of my period where I could go negotiate. I was like, I need to go negotiate with the UFC. And so I'm just constantly in my head, hey, you know, talking to managers and at some point, once again, it's like, it all falls on me. Like, I can't wait for my manager to make this happen. I can't wait for my other manager to make this happen. I can't wait for the UFC to reach out to me. I need to go make this happen. And didn't sleep for a little while. We were on vacation, but I really wasn't on vacation. I was somewhere else, right? And she's like, hey, listen, I love you. You need to go to Vegas. And I don't care if you go to Vegas and you have to wait there for 3 weeks or stand out in front of the UFC headquarters with the boombox like that one movie, whatever it is. But you need to go there. And Randall Alleman has been my manager for my entire career, essentially one of my best friends ever. He's like a brother to me. I could go stay with him. She's like, go stay with Randall and let's see what happens. And don't come back unless you get an answer, because you deserve an answer. And I love you. Go do it. She booked the flight for me, actually, because I wouldn't do it. I was like, I'm not going to go. And she's like, no. And she's like, I booked you a flight. You're leaving tonight at like 5 p.m. or whatever. And so I go to the UFC, I go to the Vegas. We end up getting the meeting, and I go sit down with Hunter Campbell. And we have this really great conversation, and he's like, "Man, like, it's all but done. Like, we want to sign you. Let's find something out." As I'm leaving UFC headquarters, he texted me and said, "Hey, Dana wants your number. Can I share it with him? He's gonna give you a call." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "Randall, give me Dana's number so I can save it in my phone so I know it. It pops up when it says Dana White, so I don't miss that phone call." So we went to a little place to like decompress, sit down and have a drink and talk about what just happened, because it was me and Randall in the meeting, and it went phenomenal. All of a sudden my phone rings and it says Dana White on it. And he's like, "Hey kid, I'm really sorry I wasn't able to make it. I was at a previously scheduled meeting. Now I'm on the tarmac. I'm about to go fly out to go do something." But he's like, "I don't know what the F you've been talking to my team about, but they love you. And, we got to get a deal done." And I said, "Dana, I don't believe that you've ever signed a guy who was more equally yoked with you, the UFC, and your mission than me. And I would love nothing more than to be signed by the UFC. I would love to come over to the UFC. And like I told Hunter, either I am who I say I am, or I'm not. And I'm willing to go out there and go, 0-2 and you guys cut me. But I believe that I can go out there and compete with the best guys in the world." And he's like, "I love it, man." And I said, "And also furthermore, your name has not been on one of the checks that I have cashed in my entire career. But indirectly, your name has been on every single check that I have cashed, because you, the UFC, have built this sport into what it is and quarterbacked and championed this entire industry so the other organizations can rise as you guys raise the tide," right? And he's like, "Oh my God, I fucking love it, kid." Boom, freaking, he's like, "I'll call you back." Hangs up on me. And I'm like, "Dana?" Hangs up on me and then calls you back. He's like, "Hey, I just called Hunter Campbell. I told him get the deal done. Let's make this thing happen," But and that was a story, but it truly was authentic. It's like what the UFC has done with the sport of mixed martial arts, and all the other organizations can say what they want. All the other guys in the other organization can say what they want. All the guys who have gone from the UFC and went to the other organizations, they know the truth. They know what it feels like outside of the UFC and what it feels like inside of the UFC. And it's just mutual respect. And it's, once again, walk-on mentality, gratitude. I am so grateful to be signed with the UFC. I am so grateful that my journey went from Jefferson County, Missouri, to Northwest High School, to University of Missouri, to fighting in Bellator, to going to the UFC. It all played out the way it was supposed to. And God had me in the palm of his hand the entire time. And he kept sprinkling in certain people, certain successes and certain failures to get me to that moment. One of the other things I said to him too was like, "Dana, obviously I was signed with UFC or signed with Bellator for a decade. I had never become the man that you and your organization needed or deserved me to be until now. Now I believe I have finally blossomed into that man that needs to go to the UFC. If I would have signed with the UFC 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have been the man that you deserve, or the man that the UFC deserves, the fighter that you deserve and need on your roster." And that is just a testament, and it's a story that patience is so important. And yes, you're not where you want to be today, but you have to have the confident expectancy that somewhere down the road, if you keep doing the right things and you keep holding yourself to that standard, you're going to blossom into that man or woman that you need to be. For me, it took, 16 or well, I guess it was 12 years total in the sport of mixed martial arts for me to finally blossom into the man. I was a late bloomer in high school, a late bloomer in college, and now a late bloomer in mixed martial arts. And here I am right where I'm supposed to be.
I love the idea of straight talking. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for that to Dana. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know what you said to the team, but we need to get you on board." And the story of the way Dana built the UFC, the UFC as a whole is incredible. Is there anything that stands out as a moment or a story that speaks to Dana's character?
Dana's just a straight shooter, man, and he's this idea of, Dana White privilege. Remember whenever Tony Ferguson said, you got Dana White privilege. It's and I talked about this earlier, kind of being one of the favorites on my wrestling team and the favorites on my high school wrestling team, and one of the favorites in Bellator, and then now one of the favorites in the UFC, and having Dana White privilege. Like there's a recurring theme here that if you do the right thing and you operate with integrity and you bring value and you don't overvalue yourself too much in order to exude so much entitlement that it's a turnoff, then you become an indispensable asset to your profession and an indispensable asset to the organization that you are currently under employment with. So we've had a couple of contract negotiations, and it's obviously, it's always mutually beneficial. I never overvalue myself, and they never try to undercut me. They want to pay me what I am worth, and I ask for a little bit more each time, and the answer is always yes. And why is the answer always yes? Because they know they have a stock that continues to rise. And even if that stock dips every now and then, I have all the other intangibles. The intangible of treating the janitor at the UFC the same way I would treat Dana White, and treat the media the same way that I would treat Hunter Campbell, and trading. There's becoming an asset and operating to the best of your ability is so underappreciated and undervalued in people's lives. They don't really quite realize that every decision that you make as a whole continues to rise you up where it's going to make you fall. And so there's not really any real, I guess, stories there aside from my last contract negotiation when he offered me something and I said, "Hey, what's holding you back from this much more?" And he's like, "F it, done." And I'm like, maybe I should have asked for more. But that's what it is. And I actually reached out to him the day, what was it? UFC 300. Someone at the press conference, was talking about, "Hey, you know what? This is UFC 300. We should have $300,000 bonuses." He gave out three $300,000 bonuses that night. But at the press conference, he's like, F it, done. That's money to these guys they're willing to give it for the right cause and for the right guy and for the right asset, So yeah, they get a pretty bad rap for fighter pay and all these other things, but there's a reason why people stay with the UFC for as long as they do and hardly ever leave.
I want to roll it back to the number 688. You said if you ever wrote a book, that'd be the title of the book, 688. Why is it so significant?
688 days when I lost my first fight. I think I was 12-0. Lost my first fight, and then lost the next two fights after that. As soon as I lost that first fight, I immediately went into a downward spiral, athletically, mindset wise. I immediately started blaming other people. I immediately forgot how good I was. And I immediately kind of just shunned myself and hid myself because of the embarrassment and the shame that I had, right? And everybody loses in mixed martial arts. The crazy thing is I look back and I think, man, okay, now I've got 7 more losses since then, and none of them have been any more impactful than that first one, because life is a series of ups and downs, and we don't follow people because of the virtual certainty of their success or because of their successes. We follow them a lot of times because of their failures and the things that they have overcome and how they've pulled themselves back out, because people love a comeback story. But when you're young and you have that first experience, you don't know how to handle it, right? Especially losing a wrestling match wasn't that big of a deal because there was not a lot of media surrounding it. It was in front of like 500 people at the Hearn Center in Columbia, Missouri. You lose your first fight to Eddie Alvarez and millions of people are watching. You lose the world title. That's a much bigger deal, and people are writing articles about it and tweeting about it and Instagramming about it and all this stuff. It's a bigger thing, and I wasn't ready for that failure. So not that you ever need to think about failure. It's important to focus on success and focus on winning and focusing on the accomplishment, but also building yourself up so that your view and your self-image of yourself is so high that when that bump in the road does happen, it only just is a blip on the radar and it doesn't absolutely tank you. I realized that I was doing all the physical work, all the reps, all the sets, doing more than what was asked of me, but I just took for granted my mindset and my mentality. So then I locked myself away from people, the media, put myself in this little jail cell of self-pity where I was having a little pity party and I started blaming other people, and I started making excuses, and I got a little bit lazy, and it was just a constant downward spiral. And now, years later, looking back, every time I have a loss or a setback, I realize that action and movement is medicine. Continuing to move forward. It's the same reason why every time I've had a fight, win, lose, or draw on a Saturday, I'm doing some kind of interview on Monday. Lose a fight, go to the busing with the boys, get on there, talk about the loss. Why? Yeah, to be on a platform, but to be an example, to be a shining light, to show people that it's okay to talk about your losses. And here I am, standing confidently on my own 2 feet with a busted up nose and a black eye and a set of stitches and another loss on my record. But here I am. Yeah, I failed, but I failed while daring greatly. And I'm the man in the arena that everybody else watched. And it ends up building more of a fan base and a deeper fan base and a deeper connection with those around you, because everyone is going to suffer losses and everyone's going to suffer failures. But that was all the things that I learned from that first loss. But I didn't quite have enough time to make the requisite adjustments. Lost the next fight after that. And then it got even worse, and then lost my next fight after that. And I went 688 days without winning a fight. I lost 3 fights in a row. So I went from 12-0 to 12-3 and lost 3 fights in a row. And when you're not winning, everything else suffers. Your training suffers, your relationship suffers, your self-image suffers. But it wasn't until after that, finally after that second loss, I finally saw my first sports psychologist and kind of sat down, and we just started talking about things, right? Because I didn't want to constantly talk to my wife about it, didn't want to constantly talk to other people about it. I needed to just kind of sit down and start unpacking things and talking about it and really start taking all the pressure off me. Because what I realized is I had spent so much time trying to be perfect when really I just needed to be successful. I spent so much time. I got to the point where, leading into that first loss, it was every single sparring session, there's a 5-minute round, and I could win 4 minutes and 59 seconds of it. But if I lost that 1 second of it, it was a loss in my mind, when really I won 99.999% of the round, but it felt like a failure to me because I needed to be perfect. So I started putting so much pressure on myself. And now, as a 38-year-old, 16-year in the sport, grown man with a wife and 2 kids and the accolades, I realized that failure is just a part of the journey, and I will never be perfect, and perfection and trying to be perfect just leads to pain.
You spoke about mental highlight reels being part of that work that you was doing. Can we paint a mental highlight reel? Maybe one of the first ones you ever did. What did that look like?
So I read that book by Gary Mack called Mind Gym. I forget when it was. I think it was actually in college. So, my mental highlight reel started in college. But I didn't really fully invest in it. It was more something I would make a list and be like, oh, I'll get to that when I need to. Like, the reps in the gym are more important. And then later on, now I realize, okay, the reps in the mind gym are so much more important than the reps in the gym. So now it is stuff dating all the way back to high school wrestling, stuff dating all the way back to college wrestling, stuff dating back to my relationship with my wife and first dating her, and in the young years of us in our marriage, and now having 2 boys, and the highlight reels, the highlights of me being a father, and the things that other people say, and the opportunities that I have, and the platforms that I have, and then the performances that I've had in Bellator and then in the UFC, and just going over those things and being completely okay and completely content and not feeling like a narcissist for sitting here and going over the highlights and the things that I've accomplished, because I spent so many years running away from those things because I didn't want to think about those things, because I never wanted to be complacent, when really it's just loving your journey and loving yourself and being okay with not resting on your coattails, not saying, okay, I accomplished that, so I don't need to work anymore, but being genuinely proud of what you've done and what you've accomplished. And just closing your eyes and thinking, yeah, I wasn't supposed to beat that guy. And yeah, they all doubted me here. And yeah, this was a really tough thing to overcome. And yes, this was accomplished, and holy cow, how did that happen? And a lot of it is athletically, and some of it is relationally, and some of it is financially, and some of it is platform, and just reminding yourself exactly who you are.
You've gravitated towards manifestation quite a bit. What does what does manifestation mean to you, and how have you implemented, what's some of the biggest ways you've implemented it?
Being able to see who you want to be, what you want to do, and what you want to have. Obviously for me as a mixed martial artist, it is laser focused on what's happening when that octagon door closes and my performance in each one of my fights. But then also from a holistic standpoint of my life, how much impact do I want to make? How healthy am I? How fulfilled and how peaceful and how joyful am I? How much money do I want to have? How much, what kind of friends am I surrounding myself with? Reminding myself the friends that I do have, the influential people in my life that I do have in my corner, and just being okay with wanting so much more for your life, but being content with where you're at, but also knowing that you're going to accomplish more and not trying to force it today, just continuing to take little chinks, little chunks out every single day, and realize that this is a long, long journey and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, I think people get frozen by the idea of what they want, but it being such a big gap that they struggle to bridge it. You know, they struggle to take those tiny little steps because it just seems so distant.
Yeah, well, and that's where the keeping of little promises to yourself, you know, I mean, we all need these big, lofty goals, right? We all need these big, lofty goals. But, you know, if my goal always was to be a UFC champion and be the number one guy in the world, how was I going to be able to deal with that whenever I was losing to guys in the gym who you will have never heard of and he has never heard of, and quite frankly doesn't even deserve to be in the same octagon with me? But I was going to have my bad days. But so it's just like, it's every day realizing that it's just a little bit of improvement. And sometimes setbacks are the catalyst for improvement. Sometimes having a bad day is the catalyst for catapulting you toward the next level. You know, we need these failures and we need the struggle and we need the pain. We need these things to go through that galvanize us for the next version of ourselves. You know, just like I talked about with that conversation with Dana White, is like, I would not have been the man that needs that is able and willing to step into the UFC octagon on the biggest platform possible had I not had to go through the things that I had went through. So as you age, you just look back at things and you say, you know what? Things always work out and things take time. And as long as you're operating with integrity and you're not consciously trying to sabotage your life, and you try to do the right things, and you try to be nice to people, and you try to do your best with what you have, ultimately it's going to work out, and all the hard work eventually pays off, but you still have to be standing there to receive it when it does. It's the long game. It's the marathon of life. And the get rich quick 15 minutes of fame world that we're in 2024, everybody wants it now. We want instant gratification. A lot of people don't reach their destination because of a roadblock that they encounter. They reach their destination. They don't reach their destination because of a lesser accomplishment or a lesser path down a clear road, and they decide to veer off. You know, it's like you're walking down a road and you're trying to get to where you want to go, but then your back starts hurting a little bit and your feet start hurting a little bit, and you encounter a little bit of opposition. There's a couple little things you got to zigzag between, but then all of a sudden there's a nice clear path over there to the left that's not where I wanted to go. And yeah, that's not as good as the place I was going, but it sure does seem a lot easier. So I'm just going to go down that path. And that's, in my opinion, why so many people end up in places that they don't want to be or give up on their dreams just because they could have been so close, but they just didn't want to keep on trying.
I love that. You spoke about setbacks there. What was the lowest moment in the 688 days? Do you remember?
So it was very interesting too, because, and it was a very, very coincidental that, you know, I had just gotten married. So it's like me and Bree get married, and I don't even know if I won a fight after we got married. So her first fight she ever went to, I knocked out knock this guy out in like 40 seconds. And she's like, oh, this is easy. This is great. My husband wins fights in 40 seconds and this is easy. Then I might have won one more fight. And then I had my first loss, and it was a 5-round, 25-minute knockdown drag out war. My face is all jacked up. I lose to Eddie Alvarez. And then that's when it hit. And she's like, okay, this is what I signed up for. Well, I didn't quite know this is how brutal this sport is. So we had just lost. I had just lost, and I'm able to kind of, whatever, my first loss, no big deal. I changed, but I hadn't changed like I had changed after my second loss. I lose my second fight. And I think it was after my second fight that I lost, that I remember getting done. And we had this little old Spanish style house in San Diego. And we got back from wherever I fought, and we brought the suitcases up the stairs, and we wheel them in, and I just like wheel it into the living room, and I just go sit down on the couch. And then she could tell I was like, because I think it hadn't quite hit me yet until you get to your comfort, right? Like your comfort spot. Like I get done with the fight, I'm at the airport, I'm at the hotel. Don't let it out yet. Get on the plane, fly back, don't let it out yet, you're in public. Then all of a sudden you get to your house where you can close the door, and it's like, okay, this is my spot. And I sat down on the couch and I just started bawling, crying. And then she came up to me and sat next to me, and she starts bawling, crying. And it's just because she sees how hard I work, and she saw the sacrifices that I was making. And it's like, it doesn't really compute that you can work this hard and you can do all the right things, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. It's just the way it is, right? So it feels like injustice. It feels like it's unfair. It feels like, what else can I do? Is this my peak? Did I already hit my peak? Will I never win a fight again? Not to mention the fact, for me, it wasn't even necessarily about the loss of the fight. That's not that big of a deal. I still got my paycheck. I still I got 2 arms and 2 legs. I'm not injured. Let's keep on fighting. But it was more standing across the altar from her less than a year prior and making a promise to her to have and to hold, and love and sickness, for rich or for poor, and making these promises to take care of her and provide for her. Yet now all of a sudden my career seems like it's going up in smoke. Completely seems like it's crashing and burning right now. So there was all those fears and doubts and insecurities that I was having to deal with. So I think that was because you lose one fight, no big deal, get back on the winning track, you're good, because that was my first experience. In the sport of wrestling, you could lose a wrestling match on Wednesday, but by Saturday, you get another opportunity to go get back into the win column, and maybe you lose 2 in a row, no big deal. The following Tuesday, you get another opportunity, boom, you're back on the winning track. Mixed martial arts, you got 4, 5, 6 months in between fights, and that's a lot of days. It's a lot of practices. It's a lot of self-deprecating thoughts. It's a lot of idleness. It's a lot of self-doubt, And so that was probably the lowest moment. And obviously I didn't do enough work yet, because I lost the next fight after that. And but I think by that time, my first loss was, holy cow, this is a crazy new experience. I don't know how to deal with this. And it carried into my second loss. Second loss was, oh man, something is wrong with me. I need to get something figured out. So then I started doing the work. By the third loss, it almost felt like, hey, I did the work. I'm coming out of this. I'm growing. I'm blossoming. And this is just the way the cookie crumbles in the sport of mixed martial arts. You're going to win. You're going to lose. So I was already on the forward, upward trajectory when I had that third loss. So I was kind of coming out of it, and I was able to deal with that third loss better. Even though now I had my third loss in a row, I was somehow in a better place mentally than I was after the first fight and the second loss.
Wow. Did you have negative self-talk when, the between 1 and 2, like what were you saying to yourself? Like, did you have poor self-image? I know you've spoken about that. Like, what were the kind of things you would say when you looked in the mirror? Like, or what were the kind of things you would think?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's what I have talked about in different writings or keynotes or whatever, when I made those mistakes. Like the first biggest mistake I made too was it's like skill amnesia. It's like I completely forgot how good I was. I went from nonstop smashing people 12-0 to immediately lose my first fight. I wake up the next morning and I feel like I've lost all my speed, all my power, all my technique, all my talents, when really I was just as talented after that loss as I was right before the loss. It was just my perception and my mindset of my skill set and how good I was or how good I wasn't, right? So I started having that self-doubt, like, well, and really that's when, because I hadn't quite made the transition yet to really starting working on my self-image. And that was when that little guy from that little town who was taught to do little things, who had been so prevalent and so loud in high school and so prevalent and so loud in college, but then he was just kind of taking a nap or almost waiting dormant, almost just sitting there behind a corner, just waiting to pounce and waiting to strike for when I had that first setback, to finally grab his megaphone and say, I told you the media was right. I told you the naysayers were right. I told you you were a flash in the pan. I told you that you weren't supposed to be here. I told you that you've been a fraud and a fake and a phony and you're not this good the entire time. I've been waiting to tell you this. You're not that good. You're not supposed to be a champion. You have been riding this high of this success that you've had. And here we are. Now here's our downward spiral. Come on back to mediocre. Come back to the basement with me. Come back to self-loathing. Come back to self-deprecating thoughts. Come back. You're not supposed to be out there in the light. You're not supposed to be an example. You're not supposed to be a role model. You're not supposed to be a mentor. You're not supposed to be rich and famous and on a platform and all of these different things. Come back here where it's comfortable. Because this jail cell that we sit in, the jail cell of self-loathing and the jail cell of self-pity and the jail cell of mediocre and knowing you aren't even coming close to scratching the surface of your human potential. Yeah, it's painful, and yeah, it's less than you deserve, but it sure is comfortable. Come back here and lay on this dingy little hard, cold cot with me in this jail cell. And that's right where I fell. And luckily, we came out of it. I had the keys in my hand the whole time. That's the beautiful thing. There's a song by NF called Outcast, and he said, woke up, where am I at? I'm in a jail cell, the door's locked, but the keys are in my hand. And that's how the self-image and the self-deprecating thoughts are, is you have the keys in your hand. You just haven't taken the steps necessary to stick that key in the keyhole and unlock that door to go be free from them.
I hope people listening can see we've got, a champion in front of us who's willing to say that and is explaining probably similar situations they've been in themselves. That inner voice, telling them that you're not capable, you are where you grew up or your background or your circumstances, and that you have experienced that yourself. I think that's so powerful. I just think it's incredible.
You guys might have been aware that we recently completed the world's heaviest marathon. I carried 100 kilos on my back for 27.8 miles. I then took that stone to a stonemason, had it cut down to a 25 kilo stone, a headstone for my son Jacob, and I ran 450 miles from the north of Scotland to Nottingham to bring the headstone back for my son. Now, I didn't just do that for fun. I did that to raise awareness. I did that to bring the stone back for my son. And I also did that to raise money for his charity. If you guys want to support that, we have an amazing giveaway with Brass Monkey. You guys know that I've been using Brass Monkey for the last few years, and I absolutely believe in cold therapy and ice therapy. Well, Brass Monkey is the leader in that. They are premium ice plungers, and the ice bath that they have given us to give away for this giveaway is £24,000. All you have to do is go to the link in the description for the giveaway. Every £5 donation goes to the charity and you get a chance to win the bath. You can enter as many times as you want, and there's a great opportunity to win and help support this cause, where bereaved parents will now be getting headstones because of the money that you guys have donated. So thank you so much. Let's dive back into this incredible episode with Michael Chandler.
The idea that, you're so physical, one of the hardest workers physically, super strong, super fast, like all these incredible physical feats, and you train to a physical level that, is in the top, minute of percentages. But then when we speak to you, and you put emphasis on that, but when we speak to you, you say the mental is one of the most important things. Why? Why is that the case?
Because a man or a woman will never be able to consistently perform in a manner that is inconsistent with the way that they see themselves. So if you do the work of a champion and you do the work, or you have the discipline of a champion and you put the reps in like a champion and you do all the physical things like a champion and you make the sacrifices like a champion, but you don't truly believe that you're a champion, you're going to find success every now and then and you're going to perform at a high level sometimes or maybe even often, but you'll never be able to consistently perform in that manner if you don't truly see yourself as a champion. And the self-image is the guiding light and the lens by which you look through in every single aspect of your life, from your profession to your relationships, to the person that you marry, to the money that you make, to the accomplishments that you have. It is the most important thing. And it's in the world that we live in, we have a lot of people who have become self-image and self-improvement addicts, where they're constantly trying to learn new things and they're trying to become better, or they're trying to learn how to become better, but they're not actually trying to be better. You know, it's like we're trying to learn things, or you could even take this interview and you can glean this information and you're sitting there and you're just starry-eyed and you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and you're like, yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that. But then this interview ends, or this video ends, and then you go back to the everyday normal life that you live without making any actual changes. So motivation and inspiration and all of that is the means to the end of an increased self-image. And how do you increase the self-image? The most important thing that you can do is keep promises to yourself, because reliability is the most important thing that you can be. Honesty, integrity, full of character, and reliable. If the cameras that we are on right now, or the lights that we are on right now, work today, but they don't work in the next one, all of a sudden you're gonna file that. Okay, maybe it's time to replace these. And then the next one they work, and then the next one after that they don't work, and the next one after that they don't work. You're not gonna have very much faith in the light. You're not gonna have very much faith in the camera. Yet we don't look at our own lives and our own selves like that. We're like, okay, well, I know I had a standard and I set a standard, but I didn't meet that standard. You immediately reinforce to yourself that you are an unreliable human being, that you are an unreliable man. And yes, you need to show yourself grace. You are not perfect. I've already talked about not being perfect, but we all know what right is. We all know what wrong is. We all know what we need to do, but instead we choose what we want to do and we sacrifice the things that we need, which is then in turn eating into our self-image every single day that we choose to do the wrong things. And I'm human. I make mistakes. I cut corners. I have moments of laziness. I don't meet my standards. It happens, right? But if life is a series of decisions and a series of trade-offs for doing what you need to do and not what you want to do, how many times are you doing what you need to do instead of doing what you want to do? Because we all want comfort. We all want ease. We all would love to just sit here and never have to work and never have to put the reps in. If I could have my 8-pack abs, but just sitting here and eating what I want and not having to put the work in, yeah, it would be great. But I don't deserve it if I don't do what I need to do, right? And luckily, individual sports, and luckily, I was even thinking about today when we were doing the workout. It's like we had a thought. It's like, hey man, this is going to look really good whenever we start sweating, right? I'm like, okay, well, it takes me about 5-6 minutes to start sweating. And I just thought about that. I was like, all I got to do is get on this bike, and right around that 5 to 7 minute mark, my body is going to start sweating. So I saw the reward. I gave us what we wanted by just doing the work, and I could see it come out. And then I start eating right during camp, and all of a sudden my weight comes down, and I lift weights, and then I see my numbers go up. I put the work in, and then I get faster and stronger. So my life and athletics is it's that litmus test and that blueprint from all you have to do is put the work in, and then good things happen. And that happens in every single area of life. But it's the constant pursuit, the aggressive pursuit of comfort, the aggressive pursuit of shying away from pain and shying away from discomfort and shying away from doing the things that we need to do that are ultimately eating into our self-image, which eats into every single aspect of our life, which then affects our relationships and affects every single aspect of our life. And then we start blaming other people when really it's all about us. And increase your self-image by keeping promises to yourself and holding yourself to a high standard and taking full accountability for your life.
Keeping promises to yourself, so important. I think you stop breaking those promises, you get into a habit of not keeping your own word, which I think is like one of the most detrimental things you can do when you start compounding that over time. The walk-on mentality, that having that mentality of jumping into the deep end, pushing yourself beyond limits. Where's the walk-on mentality of fighting Conor McGregor? Like, do you feel that you've got that walk-on mentality with that fight? Yeah,
patience. Extreme patience, patience that a lot of people question. That's number one. Number two, it's the perfect closing of a chapter to get to the next chapter for the guy who was doubted and the guy who wasn't supposed to be there, the guy who walked on, who started at the bottom of the totem pole and there was only one way to go, which was up, to be standing across the octagon against the biggest name in combat sports. In the history of combat sports, there may never be a guy who becomes bigger than Conor McGregor, no matter how big the sport gets. It just seems so fitting that it's me. The guy who was not the biggest name, the guy who didn't cut his teeth in the UFC for a decade, the guy who was outside of the UFC, the guy who was a walk-on at Mizzou, the guy who was and has an image and a message of, hey, I have doubted myself just like you doubt yourself. I have self-sabotaged myself just like you have. I have had the self-deprecating thoughts and the self-image issues just like you have. But hey, guess what? Here I am. And all it is the diligent, consistent, persistent pursuit of becoming my best self that I'm still able to be standing here today in this position with a contract signed with Chandler versus McGregor. This is the Super Bowl of a mixed martial arts career. When you get into the sport of mixed martial arts, you want the biggest names, the brightest lights, the biggest platform, the highest stakes. This is all of those things times 100 compared to every single other fight that will happen in the next 5 years.
The one thing I love about the fight itself is the battle of the minds, the manifestation thing. And I think a large conversation when Conor first came to the UFC was manifestation, how he'd manifest situations. And then, it's something massive to you, this mentality of manifestation. When you manifest that fight, talk us through it. I know we spoke about it briefly on the bike, but talk me through what that's like. Do you manifest, do you envision stepping into the cage, the smells, the feeling, the stadium, Conor's face on the other side of the ring? What's it like?
More important than the opponent and the two arms and the two legs and the job to do, more important is the aura of the event. Number one, it has been the longest build up to a fight that we have ever seen, right? It's been taking a year and a half, could end up being 2 years by the time it happens. And then to compound on top of that, it's the biggest fight of the last 5 years. It'll be the biggest fight of the next 5 years. So just stepping into that arena, which is a different arena than any other arena that any other fighter is listening to right now, or any other fight that I have had, because the stakes are that high and a fight against him is that big. So starting to visualize and see myself handling that well, handling the pressure of the moment, handling the bigness of the moment, the massive implications that this fight has surrounding it. And then you hone in on the two arms and the two legs and the opponent and his strengths and his weaknesses and how I think I go out there and absolutely dismantle him. And I believe I've studied Conor. I've watched his fights. I have watched his areas in which I can exploit and the areas in which I can dominate him. And I think there are many ways that I can finish this fight. And I do believe that immediately from the first bell, I meet him in the center and I immediately start making him second guess himself. Immediately, Conor's going to come out and he's going to try to get in my face. He's going to try to take control of the fight. And very quickly, he will realize that he is in an octagon with a very, very game opponent. I do believe that I knock him out in the second round. I believe that when the self-doubt starts coming in, when all of the deficiencies of his actions, the compounding effect of his lack of focus for the sport of mixed martial arts, when all of those things start setting in at a subconscious level and it raises his heart rate, he's going to go downhill, and he's going to go downhill quick, and I'm going to see an opening, and I'm going to get the finish.
That's the thing that I was interested in. If you'd got to the point where you had situations and you'd fought through or felt through situations through sort of visualization of a finish, of a specific moment, like is there multiple? I know obviously there is multiple ways you would finish a fight, but in your head, are there multiple options, or do you have are you fixated on certain things? Or
obviously the most exciting way to finish somebody is a knockout. The most desirable way to finish somebody is a knockout. But I think a fight like this is watching two guys start fighting and then watch one man shrink and watch the other man grow, and watch one man gain momentum as the other one loses steam, to see the actual human spirit dominate the other man, his opponent's human spirit, to watch him wilt and to get on top of him and beat him with my fists until he gives up his neck and I snatch his soul out of his body. That would be ideal. I think whether I just hit him with so many punches that the ref pulls me off of him, or he turns over and I take his neck and then rip his soul out of his body from his neck.
When we spoke about the work that you're doing outside of the octagon, the training, or even in the octagon, everything to the diet, those tiny details. Do you think that your level of that is way above what Conor's doing? Do you think that you are exceptionally above that?
I do. I think, obviously I have no problem saying that I believe I'm the most prepared guy and trained the hardest and trained the most with the most attention to detail of any fighter, let alone Conor, who has shown chinks in his armor of enjoying the spoils of his labors, enjoying the lavish lifestyle that he has, enjoying the money that he has, enjoying the spotlight and the platform that he has. And all of those things take you away from keeping the main thing. And the main thing is just the work, the grind. The accomplishments from 2016 and 2017 and 2018 are not going to carry you into accomplishments into 2024. We're talking about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. We're talking about a new time. And you're also talking, to compound that, you're talking about a guy who has been doing every single thing right since he was 14 years old in hand-to-hand combat. And yes, I've had my moments, and yes, I've had my setbacks, but ultimately it's been a constant, steady growth since the year 2000. And here we are.
There's 2 points on this that I'll ring the question off, but the first one is just asking about sort of how you've maintained your hunger. But I'm curious if you'd comment on this as well, is because I feel like there's, what we're talking about now is two different types of people now. And I think when I can't remember if it was a documentary or something, but Conor spoke about he'd spend his check so he could stay hungry. He'd spend his whole check so he could stay hungry within a fight. Do you think the fact that he's reached both of you have reached this level of success, that he's lost some hunger in that? He's not the wolf on the hill anymore,
Yeah.
And how have you maintained the other side of that?
Yeah. I mean, I can't judge a man without knowing him, but I mean, obviously we all know publicly how he acts, how he reacts, how he lives his life. I've always been a guy who there's never enough for me, so I was always very, very smart with my money. I made prudent investments, set aside money for taxes. So I never spent my money. I was always investing in other things, investing in businesses, investing in real estate. And even now, we're having a very comfortable financial picture. It's still not enough, because I believe that I can make more and I can create more and I am self-sufficient enough to make massive amounts of money, but more importantly, the platform, and more importantly, the significance, and more importantly, the shining light that I can be to a younger generation. You know, the age-old debate of, you know, are professional athletes role models? You know, some will say we are, and some will say, hey, I didn't sign up for that. I just want to play my sport. I just want to do my thing. I've always been the kind of guy who, I know there's young men, especially, looking at me. So it's very important to me to continue that reputation and to continue that platform. That more than the money, and that more than the fame, so to speak, or the celebrity, so to speak. Whereas a guy like Conor, I don't think that is high on his priority list. I think power and money and the illusion of significance and happiness has kind of been his main goal the last 6 years since he fought Floyd Mayweather.
You feel there's any risk of that happening to yourself? Like, is there a level of success, money, success in business, success in publicly that could cause that to happen to yourself?
No, I think money, just like alcohol, doesn't really change you. I think it just reveals who you truly are. I think, you know, and my view of money has changed over the years. And, you know, I was thinking about this and I don't think I got to it in a previous question, but so growing up where I grew up and kind of hearing the stories or the mentality around me was that, you know, rich people or people with money probably aren't that nice. They're probably not that giving. They're probably not that courteous. They're probably not that gracious, right? Because money, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? Or money is the root of all evil, right? We've all heard these things, but it wasn't until I went to college, and as I touched on, that, you know, being around a guy from California and being around a guy from New York and being around a guy from Pennsylvania and being around a guy from Illinois and being around guys from all these different socioeconomic and regional areas of the United States, and then also going to a Bible study with a doctor named Bus Tarbox, who was well off. He owned a orthopedic surgeon, or he was an orthopedic surgeon and owned an orthopedic surgery practice. So to say the man was doing well for himself is an understatement, yet he was the most gracious, the most kind, the most loving, a great leader, great father, great husband, great friend. He was generous. His reputation was through the roof. And he was the first person that I remember thinking, wait a second, I was told that people like him want to step over people like me. I was told people like him think they're better than people like me. I was told people like him aren't good people. So I had this cognitive dissonance of like, wait a second, my belief is that money is the root of all evil and rich people are bad and you're supposed to be poor and lowly like me. And he was that first person that started unlocking that. And that was one of the very pivotal moments of my life where I was like, this guy, this is who I want to be. Not one of those guys. I don't want to hate him just because he had some success. And now as I've had success and make good money and have climbed the socioeconomic ladder, I know there's people that probably still have that mentality, and it's a disease. It's a mind disease that we have, and a lot of it just takes time to overcome, and when you have more experiences, right? So that was when I kind of changed my perception of how money really was, and how money is a vehicle for happiness, and money is a vehicle for change, and money, without having financial security and without having financial stability and without having money in excess, you can't bless as many people as you normally would otherwise.
100%. Yeah, you need to be in a position to be able to do it, for sure. It's interesting when you talk about that. That's something I think my sister as well experienced. I experienced growing up, and I think in the UK it's worse than the US. I think in the US, when we've experienced the US, and there's a lot of celebration of success as well, more so than the UK. In the UK, I'd say it's very similar to the mentality you talk of, and it's like the rich, you know, like you say, step over, don't care, stand on the shoulders of the poor. And I had that mentality for a long time of like almost like a repulsed by the rich, and like thinking that they're looking down on me, thinking that they're disgusted by me and they hate me too. So it was always like that kind of friction. And similarly, as the business started doing well and I started to meet people from different situations, maybe people who had grown from where I'd been to, you know, where they are now, start to realize it's not the case at all. And that it's just a stereotype that's so, it keeps people, attempts to keep people in the position where, I don't know, maybe they shouldn't be. Like, I think that, you know, we should all have the ability to be able to grow and succeed in life. Yeah. So, you know, with that, you know, you went on to, I know the story of how this man had an impact on your life. And then I want to talk about, you know, meeting your wife and becoming a family man as well. I don't want to run too much time because I think we could probably talk about this for a while, but how did you go from that point, you know, be inspired by this man, by his morals and the way he held himself, to being attracted, or sort of, is attracted the right word? Attracted be the right word, or towards your wife, towards?
Yeah, I mean, I needed to become the man that I was supposed to be before I ever met her, because she would have.
The gap is crazy.
Yeah, the gap is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because, so very interesting, you know, coincidence. Like, my Bible study leader, Bus Tarbox, his Bible study leader was Bree's dad.
Yeah.
You know, and so I knew, you know, Columbia, Missouri is a small little town. It's a big college town with a bunch of people in the college, but it's a small little town. So there's reputation. People have reputation. And I knew his reputation. Bree's dad, Dr. Kent Willett, dentist. And I got this tooth chipped and I went to his office. And so I kind of already knew of him a little bit, but didn't really know much about him aside from his great reputation. And I started seeing these pictures on the wall of this cute little brunette girl with Dr. Willett. And I was thought, man, that got to be his daughter. And first of all, she is beautiful. And if she is anything like him, if she has any semblance of an upbringing like I think she has, like, that's a keeper right there. And then, you know, he fixes the tooth or whatever. But then another Bible study that I went to in college with a bunch of college kids, the Bus Tarbox was the wrestling Bible study. This one was with a bunch of students, and they kept talking about this Bree Willett girl. And I kept thinking, man, that's that girl. That's that girl that I saw in the picture, and that I've been looking at on Facebook and like stalking her on Facebook a little bit, right? And luckily I had a bunch of mutual friends on Facebook and a bunch of mutual friends in real life. And so when I finally sent the Facebook request to her, she accepted. And then years later, I sent her a message finally, and we talked online back and forth for like 2-3 years. And she was applying for critical care residencies at the University of Missouri, or actually around the country, but also she ended up going to Mizzou, or working at the University of Missouri ER. And so she deactivated her Facebook account. She sent me her email, and we just emailed back and forth for that like 2-year period. She would send me a message. She would send me an email. I would email her right away. And then she'd wait like a month or two to respond. And then I'd send it right back. And then she'd send another month or two, because she was just married to medicine. She was focused. She didn't need me. She didn't need a man. She was capable on her own 2 feet. And also, she wasn't really interested in being a, you know, significant other of a professional athlete. She had all of her, number one, she didn't know anything about mixed martial arts. She didn't know anything about fighting. She had all the normal preconceived notions of what a fighter was, the anger issues I had, why I do what I do, the type of person I must be. And then secondly, professional athlete. She's not a public eye type of person. She doesn't like to be the center of attention. She doesn't like to be in the public eye. So actually being married to a professional athlete sounds like her nightmare. So I think she just kept pushing it off, but I stayed persistent. And then finally, Caldy's Coffee in Columbia, Missouri, I asked her to go to coffee, and then she walked in, and as soon as I saw her silhouette, it was a very sunny, cold day in January, and I saw her silhouette, and I thought, there she is. Like, that's my wife for sure. And then we sat down, and she only gave us about an hour, because I told her we met at like, I had to leave for practice at 3:00, and she said, okay, I'll meet you at 2:00. Like, she only gave us 1 hour with an hour backstop, just in case she needed to dip out and she wasn't feeling it. So she only gave us an hour, and she left hoping that I would end up calling her. And I left not wanting to skip practice and then just hang out with her the rest of the day. But ultimately I went to practice, and then we've started dating for about 11 months. We dated for 11 months, and then I asked her to marry me, and we were engaged for 5-6 months, and then we've been now married. It'll be 10 years, September 6th. So almost 10 years married.
So around 3 years in, you guys decided to adopt. Is that right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, how did that decision come about? And
She always wanted to adopt. Like everyone in her like close inner circle and family she always talked about adoption. It was like something she wanted to do for some reason. And within the first couple months of us dating, when we really started getting serious, where you start having those conversations like, oh, what does it look like to you? How many kids do you want to have? Or whatever. She brought up the adoption thing, and it kind of caught me by surprise because I had never really thought about it. So I knew what I was signing up for. That needed to be something that I wanted to fulfill for her, or we could fulfill together if we were going to choose to get married. And just thought about it a lot, prayed about it a lot, sought out wise counsel and talked to different people about it. And then, we knew we wanted to start a family, and we had some acquaintances of ours who had just started a family via adoption, like their first child they adopted. And we saw that and we're like, well, maybe that is our path. Why don't we just adopt first? And then if we have biological children later, we'll have biological children later. So we made that decision, went through all the process, and then along came Hap.
so then, what's that? What was that like, becoming a father?
The scariest / most exciting thing ever. Getting married, first of all, I married a very strong woman, a very capable woman, a very self-sufficient woman, an independent woman who would be completely fine independently by herself, but desires and wants the love of a man, right? But she's the type of woman I could go leave for 8 weeks and go on a training camp, and she handles everything and work and everything. She juggles everything, right? She's very self-sufficient. So I just came in to compliment her as a spouse. But when you talk about a child, you are that child's entire world. You are the yes and the no. You are the provision for that child. You are the supervision for that child. You are in charge of another human being's life, right? So it's similar in the way where you're giving your full self to another human being. And with being a father, I take it so seriously because I realize that, number one, I had great parents. And number two, it is the most important thing that I will ever do in my entire life. Someday when I'm laying on my deathbed, just like so many other people and so many other reports and so many other studies and so many other books that we've read and heard and seen, the things that you think about the most and are going to miss the most as you pass on, or the things that you regret the most, don't have anything to do with your job or your profession or the things you did or accomplished or the money you made or the platform you had. It's all about family. It's all about the relationships. It's all about love. And being a dad is still, it's very, very hard if you care. It's very, very hard if you hold yourself to a high standard. But it's also the most rewarding, most blissful thing that I think we will ever do on this planet.
100%. We spoke earlier as well about being selfish and balancing that with being a father as well. I'd love to hear that, because that, really interesting conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think we are examples for our children, right? We are by our actions, by the things we do, by the things that we say, we are showing them what a man is, We are showing them what a parent is. We are showing them what an adult is. And sometimes pursuing your passion is going to take you away from your children. And there's a balance, and I make conscious decisions all the time to be with my family when I could choose to go work and I could choose to go pursue something. But ultimately, and I tell my son Hap now, being 7 years old, and I'll tell the same thing to Ace, that you'll know that daddy wasn't always there, but when I wasn't there, it was because I was pursuing God's best for my life, and I was pursuing my passion. So I can be selfish a little bit in order to be selfless, to serve you guys and to love you guys, because ultimately you don't need me to be there all the time, but you need me to be the best version of myself when I am there. When I walk across that threshold of the household, after going out for 8 weeks and pursuing something, or going out for a weekend to go pursue something and reach people and fulfill my passion, when my heart is full and my cup is full and I'm able to come across that threshold and walk in a fulfilled human being, that's the version of your dad that you deserve. Not the one who makes concessions and skips out on this and skips out on that and dummies down my God's calling for my life to then become a shell of the human being that God created me to be, to then be the father, or to then be a shell of the father that I'm supposed to be. So there's a delicate dance between two, and dad guilt is a real thing. And I think it indicates that you care. And as long as you know you're doing your best, I think dad guilt is something that's gonna, yeah, it's painful and it's uncomfortable, but it's also, if you don't have any, then you probably really don't care as much as you should. If you care more about your career, you care more about your profession, or you care more about making money, yeah, those things are very important. You have to provide. But being a dad is the greatest job that I will ever have. It's the greatest title that I will ever have. And I'm not always going to be there, because in order for me to be the best dad I can be, I need to be the best husband. I need to be the best fighter. I need to be the best businessman in order to be the full version of who Michael Chandler is.
How transformative has it been when you met Bree, that both of you are kind of supporting each other and pushing each other to be the best versions of yourselves?
It works for us, and obviously we've talked about my upbringing. I had a mom and dad who both worked. And, so I saw a woman who worked and I saw a man who worked. So I said, okay, I'm going to be that, a man who works. And I would like to marry a woman like that who works, or at least pours herself into something and is busy and is productive. Right. One of my favorite things about Bree was that first attracted me to her. Obviously her looks, she's beautiful. But aside from that, I kind of enjoyed the fact that she didn't need me or want me, and it wasn't like a chase thing. It was more just like, I like her standing confidently on those own 2 feet, because that's how my mom was, and now still to this day, she doesn't have to work, but she chooses to work because she enjoys it. It's what makes her tick. So I give her the leeway and the permission, so to speak, to go pursue what she needs to pursue. And in the same way, symbiotically, she gives me the permission and the grace, the blessing to go pursue what I need to do. And we trust each other to never take advantage of that. Because I know if I say, hey, I want to go do this, or I need to go do this, her answer is, yes, I support you, go do it. But she trusts me that I'm not going to take advantage of that trust. I'm going to honor that trust. So it works for us, and it makes things hectic or chaotic at times. And we somehow, we thrive well in chaos, but it's who the Chandlers are, and we don't do normal. And, it's grown us closer together, because I'm her biggest fan and she's my biggest fan. And she's the first thing that I think about whenever I win a fight, lose a fight, get done with a fight. When I get done with a good practice, bad practice, any practice, and the same thing after she gets done with a hard day of work, we are just each other's best friends, and it works out well.
Wow, that's incredible. Let's zoom into the future a bit. 5 to 10 years. I don't want to put a time on this, just because I want to say after the fight game, whenever that is. Do you slow down? Do you focus on being a father more, or do you think that ambition grows in other aspects, reaching other people, touching other people's lives?
No, I don't think I'll ever slow down. I don't think I would do well slowing down. I think I'll do something in the public eye. I will do something that is impacting the masses. I want to use my platform that I've created, and I want to use all of the stories and all the instances and all of the experiences that I've had in the sport of mixed martial arts and translate those into messages to people, because there's so many similarities in the sport of mixed martial arts, actual physical fights inside the octagon, and how they coincide with the fights and the struggles and the things that so many people are going through in their lives. And I have a unique gift. Has been a gift to be a fighter. It's a unique gift to have this experience of this long of a fight career and this successful of a fight career and all of the ups and all of the downs being translated into messages, because fighting is in our DNA, whether we like to admit it or not, whether you're a pacifist or you are a confrontationalist, fighting is in your DNA. I believe that's the way the human spirit was designed. Every man especially needs a battle to fight and an adventure to have and a beauty to win. And I want to use those messages to try to help change the world and make the world a better place and have a lot of fun, impact a lot of people, and make a lot of money, and live as much of a fulfilled life as I can.
Obviously, I don't want you to stop. I want to see you continue fight, but the space that we're in, I would love to see you talk more, develop that, deliver that, those messages to people. Because when I hear you speak, you're amazing at it. It'd be incredible to see more focus on that. But I don't want it.
I wish I should more. I know I'm trying to work on some more speaking things. I mean, I'd like to speak. I'd like to write books. I'd like to, I'll have my own show, an interview style, and kind of dive into what makes people tick. Really pull out the different similarities that are my mentality of what I see in other people. Because there's a lot of eyeballs out there, and there's a lot of ears out there, and all of them need positivity and growth, and the people need to be fed, and the more positive and impactful voices that we have, the better this world is going to be. The better our country is going to be, the better your country is going to be, and the better the world is going to be as a whole. And the whole world and the human race have so many more similarities than we do differences. And in the world that we live in, there needs to be fighting for what people believe in, but ultimately there's so many more things that bind us together, and there's a common thread with all human beings of every walk of life.
I've got a few quotes to reel off and to see where it takes you, but just on the last point, the idea of, we've not really touched on faith much. You've mentioned it, but I've not really asked you any questions on it. And I think one of the things that people see, they see this fighter, they see this person who finds the beauty in combat sports and fighting. How do you balance that, that the faith side of things, but the fighter side of things as well? How do you find that divide?
I mean, I think the balance of it is the same in every vocation. I think sometimes there's a question of, well, how are you a Christian and a fighter? How do you love people or follow Jesus, but also fight in a cage? And I always pose the question, well, who are you to ever question a man's calling in life and how he spreads his message, right? If I'm able to reach people through what I do and how I do it, isn't that good for the kingdom? And I've spoken to many pastors and I've spoken to many churches, and the common thread always is, you are reaching people that I will never be able to reach. A pastor, right? Knows more about the Bible than me, talks to God more than I do, a better quote unquote Christian than I am, right? Yet there are people that he will never, ever, ever be able to reach that I can reach, right? And there's people that you can reach that I'm not able to reach, or that he's able to reach, right? We all have our own unique gifts. And I think more importantly is being authentic about sharing your faith as much or as little as you want. I think I don't talk about my faith a ton, and I'm not quoting scriptures all the time. And I say, God created us for this, or God created us for that. So you kind of get the Christian undertones, but I don't want to sit here and relate every single thing back to my faith. And I don't feel like that's blasphemy, or I don't feel conviction about that. I'm sure there's a story in the Bible for every single aspect of every single struggle that we're going through, right? But sometimes people just want to talk to a human being and not just base everything off of scripture or base everything off of biblical teachings, right? So I think it's being as human and normal as possible, while also living your life and rooting your life in biblical principles, to then have a message that kind of intersects the two, preaching the gospel at all times, but when necessary, use words, right? If I am able to live a life that people say, oh, I don't know what it is about that guy, he's probably a Christian. I've heard people say he's a Christian, or I heard him say the word God, but is he talking about my God? Is he talking about that God? What God is he talking about? But all I know is I like the way he lives his life, or I like his vibes. And I don't remember what he said, but I remember how he made me feel. And that's how I talk about my faith, and that's how I spread my message. And I feel comfortable with it.
I think that's really powerful. That's why we interview such variety of people as well. A guy who completely changed my life. He was a church pastor, but he doesn't preach like the word, like a typical church pastor would, you know. He delivered that message to me, and it really had an impact on me. And we know when we spoke about Theo Von, you know, someone like him can connect with an audience in a completely different way. A fighter can connect with certain people in a different way. And I think, you know, it's almost required, you know, it's really required that you can touch those people.
Yeah, no. And I know I just got done saying, like, I don't quote scripture a lot, but like one of my favorite scriptures in that vein is Paul said, I have become all things to all men so that I may win a few, right? So when you think about that and you think about, like, we are the body, right? Like, you can reach people with your gifts. So you need to be who you are to the people that need to hear your message. But there'd be people that only care about mixed martial arts or sports who don't really care about that message, right? There's just like, we all use our gifts to use our voice to reach the people that are supposed to hear it. And my message may not resonate with certain people that need to hear the message from you. And it's just different seasons and different timings. And it's, you never know who's going to make a huge impact on your life. It could be a pastor, or it could be the craziest sinner that you ever would have thought, right? And we're all sinners. And with this idea of qualification, you know, am I qualified to speak about my faith? Am I qualified to spread the word, right? But God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. You know, that's the general thread of the human existence.
For me, the sinner, the fighter, the comedian, those are where I think it's required. You know, it's required that somebody is representing on that side, because there's a quote from a friend of mine, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'll try and simplify it. He says, usually the thing that you are seeking is not where you would find, where you'd expect to find it. And it's, you know, for, I think a lot of people, especially people who enjoy fighting, you know, enjoy comedy or whatever it is, sometimes that message they need to hear is the opposite of the fighter. And it is, you know, in faith and stuff like that. And yeah, it's nice that you're opening that for so many people. I think it's incredible. Let me jump onto these quotes and get this, give you your house back. So this was one I heard, actually. I saw that you spoke about this at some point. I think it was recently. It says, only the mediocre are always at their best, because it's easy to be at your best when you're mediocre. I love that when you spoke about it. I think you pulled that quote from somewhere, but you went on to speak about it a little bit more. And I think, yeah, really important in terms of standards as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about taking chances, right? Failure is reserved for those who are taking the greatest amount of chances, right? And if you are not trying to get outside of your comfort zone, if you are not trying to attain a certain level that is at a higher rung at which you think you are capable of, then you're not really going to fail as much as those who are constantly trying to push themselves. And, you know, there's a fine line, and the mediocre are the only ones that can be expected to be at their best, right? Because they're not taking enough chances. They're not failing while daring greatly. They are worried too much about what other people's opinions are. They are worried too much about, and are too concerned about failure, because they haven't quite realized that failure is the prerequisite to success.
You spoke about motivation earlier as well. This is Jim Rohn, you know, and again, you've quoted Jim Rohn before. We're massive fans of Jim. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. Uh-huh. And again, like the spark of motivation, inspiration, this conversation to people right now, it can get you off the sofa. It can get you doing what you need to be doing, but there's something that lies way beyond that that's more important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the motivation gets you going and gets you moving in the right direction, but it making those habits and making those things a standard in your life. And then also doing it irregardless of the internal or external reward, right? There's nothing there's nothing more defeating for the person who is only motivated by the reward than whenever they don't get the reward in the amount of time that they want to get the reward, or they don't get the reward at all. But the reward is not the destination. The journey is the destination. Who you are becoming between now and getting to the destination, who you are growing into, the next version of yourself between now and getting to the destination. That's where the real growth is. And sometimes you blow right past that destination that you set for yourself because you were willing to just constantly do the little things leading up to becoming that version of yourself.
The walk-on mentality, for me, is, I heard this years ago. It's something that I absolutely loved from Jim Rohn, and I think it captures that sort of walk-on mentality, putting yourself in that position where you're not the best, and you are asking for more constantly. Don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems. Wish for more skills. Don't wish for less challenge. Wish for more wisdom. I think we ask the wrong questions so many times. We ask for the wrong thing so many times, and it doesn't come from that internal place.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing glorious about trying to do easy things. There's nothing glorious about not stretching yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I think one of the root causes of the depression and the anxiety and the self-loathing that we have as a human race is people are constantly making concessions, and they're trying to make their life easier when we weren't created for our life to be easy. We were created to be outside of our comfort zone. We were created to be uncomfortable. So in those places where our human spirit has little cracks and has little dents and has little crevices, then we are able to put scar tissue over them to then make ourselves, our human body, our human spirit more durable. So I've been on a constant pursuit of just taking pride in staying outside of my comfort zone and doing hard things and braving the unknown and putting myself through physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. So instead of asking for a lighter load, just ask for a stronger back, ask for the ability to withstand all the weight of the world that life is going to throw at you.
I love it. And I think something that would be really cool is, the man in the arena. Would you be able to read that from that? I can just turn it into like a voice thing. I mean, the story behind this mug is that your wife gifted it you as part of the UFC.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she got me this. She got me this for Father's Day. Because we talk about the man in the arena and me being that guy, and physically, obviously for my job, but also the man in the arena just in life in general. I am a guy who is not afraid to go into the arena with my chest wide open for all the shots that are going to get thrown at me. And it's not the critics who count. It's not the people who are throwing stones. It's not the people who are hurling attacks. It's the man in the arena. That's all that matters. But I'll read it for you. The Man in the Arena by Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at his worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt. But yeah, as I read that, that's one of the greatest parts, right? You talk about the critics and you talk about the guy whose face is marred with dust and sweat, and he errs and he falls short again and again, but at least if he fails while daring greatly. That's who he is. But the place he will never be is in that place with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. And I think I just imagine the road to success is littered with those kind of people who are on the outskirts of the road while you're traveling towards success, and they're hurling insults and interjecting their opinion because they don't know victory nor defeat, because they never actually tried. They never pushed themselves outside of their comfort zone. They were destined to be a beautiful blooming oak tree, but they stayed in the acorn, and if failure is a prerequisite to success, then shouldn't we be pursuing things where the likelihood of failure is higher than we are comfortable with at all times?